Hey guys, how are you all? I hope you all are doing well. Today we are going to see an amazing what-if story. But before we start, it's just a humble request that if you are new here, please subscribe because it actually motivates me a lot to post more. Also, the stories on my channel are fully written by me, so if you have any suggestions for what-if stories, please let me know below the comment section. Now, without any further delay, let's start. What if Harry Potter joined Secret Society? The kettle clicked off and the sound ran through the silent kitchen of Grimmauld Place. Dust kept falling no matter how many times they worked a cleaning charm. The table was scarred. The curtains were heavy. The house kept its stale air in the same way it kept its secrets. Harry stood by the sink and watched the window glass fog from the steam. He held his mug but did not drink. His fingers were tight around the handle. The cut on his knuckle was fresh from a splinter on the banister upstairs. He could feel his heart in the small pulse there. Hermione set a ledger on the table and flattened a page with her palm. The ink shone wet. Her hair was pinned back with two clips that had already gathered dust. Ron sat in the chair nearest the door, long legs stretched, one heel tapping the slate floor in slow rhythm. Ron broke the quiet first. This place hates people. It hated me the first time we walked in. It still does. Harry took a sip. The tea was bitter. He put the mug down. The Ministry inspection team came again this morning. Hermione said. They were from misuse of Muggle artifacts. Third visit in 2 weeks and they did not even look at the curse reports. They were proud of their new forms though. Ron snorted. New forms are the only thing they get right. Hermione folded her arms. They are trying. Trying is not enough when the house still locks its own doors at night. Ron looked at Harry. You look wrecked, mate. Did you sleep? Harry rubbed at his eyes. A bit. The word did not come out. He let the silence hang instead. The house cracked somewhere in the walls as if something settled deeper. Hermione watched him. Say it. He met her gaze and did not look away. The cheering has stopped. The speeches have stopped. The faces on the front page have moved on. I cannot shake the feeling that we only kicked a door shut and left the rest of the building open. Ron frowned. You think something else is coming. Not coming. Already here, Harry said. We just do not have words for it yet. He reached for his wand and pointed at a teacup across the table. Wingardium Leviosa. The cup trembled. It rose a finger then dropped with a dull clack. Harry stared at it. He felt heat climb his neck. Ron blinked. That charm is easy. Hermione stepped closer to the cup and tried the same charm. The porcelain shifted and floated, steady and smooth. She set it back down and looked at Harry again. You are tired. You are not broken. He nodded once. It did not feel like tired. It felt like the air in the room had thickened and he was pushing through it. He picked up their list. Clear attic. Check the Black's vault box. Burn the last of the cursed drapes. No one said anything for a moment. The quiet stretched and the kettle ticked as it cooled. Hermione spoke in a softer voice. We will finish this. Then we take a day where no one knocks and no one sends an owl and no one asks for your face on a platform. Ron stood and rolled his shoulders until his joints cracked. Right then, attic first. If we put it off again, Creature will come back from the grave and shout at us. He grabbed the torch and headed for the hall. Hermione took her wand and the ledger. Harry followed them out, hand on the rail as they climbed. The stairs complained under their weight. Each landing smelled of old smoke and furniture oil. A draft squeezed under the door to the attic and brought a thread of cold across Harry's wrist. Ron jimmied the old latch. The door opened with a long scrape. The attic breathed out dust. One small window showed a square of gray sky. Cobwebs ran from trunk to beam. The air tasted of iron and damp wood. Hermione set a small globe of light above them and kept it steady with her wand. The glow showed rows of trunks and 2 tall wardrobes. A moth fled the light and vanished behind a stack of hat boxes. We do this slow, Hermione said. We label and we do not touch anything that hums or sings or looks proud of itself. Ron grinned. So we touch nothing at all. They spread out. Harry took the left row of trunks. He opened one with a cautious charm and found it full of threadbare robes and old house badges. The next trunk held blank journals. He ran a finger down one spine and watched a thin trail appear in the dust. He tried the levitation charm again on a small box. It lifted well enough. He set it back down. His jaw eased a notch. Ron muttered as he sorted a crate of cutlery. A fork snapped at his fingers, and he snapped back a curse that would have made Mrs. Weasley frown, then heard himself and added a softer sorry to the air. Hermione worked at the wardrobe and found a black dress with runes stitched in at the hem. She froze, then warded the whole door with a clear, efficient series of spells. Harry reached the last trunk. It was smaller than the rest and plain. No crest, no keyhole, no hinges he could see. The wood was dark and smooth. He felt a prickle run across his palms before he touched it. He looked over his shoulder. Something odd here. Hermione came to his side. Ron joined them and leaned in. Looks like a bread box. Harry drew a breath and spoke to the wood. Reveal. Nothing. He tried a basic unlocking charm. The trunk did not move. He pressed his palm to it. The surface was warm. He frowned and rubbed his hand on his jeans, then set his palm again. Warm. The warmth pulsed once, as if a slow breath answered his touch. Hermione spoke very quiet. Non-verbal ward signature. Someone put intent into this. Can you feel it? Harry nodded. Feels old. He slid his hand to the side. The grain met his skin like fine grit. He pressed harder. The warmth gathered under his palm and moved with his touch. He felt the faintest tremor against his skin. A click came from inside the wood, and the top separated along a seam that had been invisible a moment before. Ron lifted his torch higher. All right then, open sesame. The lid rose under Harry's hand without a hinge. The inside was lined with dark cloth. An object lay in the center. A locket. Not the old cursed locket they had destroyed. This was smaller, built of fine plates that seemed to fold over one another in a careful pattern. It was not flashy. It looked made, not bought. It did not glow. It did not sing. It did not show a crest. Harry did not reach for it. Hermione pulled on dragonhide gloves and offered him a pair. He put them on. The leather tugged at his knuckles and made the cut sting. He lifted the locket from the cloth and felt a soft thrum in his fingers. It weighed more than it looked. The plates were cool against the glove. He held it out so they all could see. Up close the metal showed tiny lines cut into it. Not curves but short marks that stepped along its surface in a pattern he did not know. Ron squinted. Does it look like runes to you, or is my brain trying to be helpful? Not runes, Hermione said. The spacing is wrong. Harry turned it over. The back was plain. No clasp. No chain. No seam. He tried to pry and felt it resist, not by locking shut but by refusing the thought. He breathed in, and the attic air tasted like old pennies. The locket thrummed once more. The light above them flickered a moment, then steadied again. Hermione looked up at her spell, then at his hand. Did you feel that? Yes, Harry said. He set the locket back in the trunk. The thrum faded. The small globe of light held. He stood still and listened. The house made no new noise. Ron scratched his neck. Smart move. We should tag it and call Bill. Hermione nodded. Agreed. Artifact first, team later. Harry did not move. Give me a second. He reached down again. The locket answered at once. A low sound, more felt than heard, moved through the floorboards and back again, like a bass note pressed into the wood. He lifted it, and the light in the room dimmed so slightly he thought he had imagined it. He heard his own breath and the scratch of Ron's sleeve and the faint steady hum of Hermione's ward on the wardrobe door. He said one word. Mine. The metal warmed. Hermione stepped in front of him. Harry, do not claim an unknown thing in this house. He looked past her at the small window. The square of sky had shifted to a darker shade. A gust hit the roof and made the rafters creak. I know, he said. He swallowed. The locket settled in his palm as if it had wanted to be held at that height in that light in that room. He spoke again, softer. What are you? The marks on the plates lit for a breath. Not a glow. A recognition. His scar itched once and then went quiet. Ron lifted his wand. If it sprouts legs, I am hexing it straight to the Thames. Hermione took a slow breath and steadied her voice. We record and we secure. Then we take a break because all three of us are running on fumes. She held out a padded pouch. Harry set the locket above it. The metal did not drop. It hung a finger above the cloth and stayed there as if the pouch were the wrong answer. He felt the heat of it through the gloves. Hermione blinked. That is not me. Harry stared. It is making the choice. Ron stepped closer. Do you want me to get a box? Harry shook his head. Wait, he closed his fingers. The metal did not fight him. The heat rose to a steady warmth. He tasted copper again. The light above them dimmed a shade. The air pressed in around his ears and then released. The window glass trembled in its frame. Hermione touched his wrist. Put it down. Harry met her eyes. It is not hostile. Not yet, she said. He nodded once and eased the locket back into the trunk. The warmth faded. The light steadied. The air lifted from his ears. He let out a breath he had been holding without knowing it. He looked from the trunk to Hermione and Ron. This was not left by a black. Ron rubbed his jaw. You sure? Yes. It does not boast. It does not curse the room when you blink. It does not want to be feared. Hermione tapped the edge of the trunk with her wand. A neat label formed on the wood in tidy script. Unknown locket attic find left row end. She set a second ward, crisp and layered. Ron walked to the window and peered out at the tiny yard at the back. The sky was the color of damp stone. So, tea again, and then we call Bill. Before that, Hermione said, Harry, tell me what is really wrong. He looked at her. She did not blink. Ron turned from the window and watched him too. The attic felt small. The smell of metal and damp wood pressed close. Harry set his hands on the trunk. His palms were flat. He did not touch the locket. I keep waiting for the feeling to go, he said. The one that says we did not finish the job. It is worse at night. It feels like walking past a door that is almost shut and hearing wind on the other side. He stopped. He had used a picture. He saw Hermione's mouth tighten. She did not scold him for it. She spoke slow. It is fair to feel like that. War breaks more than bones. But we do not make new wars to fill the silence. We fix what is in front of us. We hold the line for each other. Ron nodded. You do not have to be a symbol every day, mate. You can be a person who hates dust and wants a quiet house and a hot bath. Harry let out a short breath. I would settle for a bed that does not feel like it belongs to a stranger. They stood with that for a moment. The attic settled again. A moth knocked once against the light and fled. Hermione put her hand over his. I want you to promise me something. Harry waited. When we find something that asks for too much, you let me argue until I win or lose fair. No more silent nods because you think pain is your duty. He looked at her hand, then at her face. All right, promise. She held his gaze 1 second longer, then let go. Ron clapped his hands once. Right, then Bill, then we let creature haunt someone else. Harry smiled without showing teeth. They went back down. The stairs creaked the same as before. The kitchen felt warmer by comparison. Hermione set water on again. Ron dug for biscuits that were probably stale and declared them edible anyway. Harry stood by the sink and stared at the fogged window again. He could see his own shape in the glass. He put 2 fingers to his scar and pressed until the itch turned to a small ache. It grounded him. Hermione slid a mug across the table. Drink. Dr. Granger prescribes it. He took the mug. Yes, ma'am. Ron grinned. She loves that. Hermione ignored him. She pulled the ledger close and wrote a clean entry for the attic find. She paused when her quill reached the word locket, as if the word itself wanted to be larger than the line allowed. An owl tapped weakly at the glass. Ron opened the window and let it in. The bird shook damp from its feathers and held out a leg. Hermione untied the strip of parchment and the owl hopped to the chair back and closed its eyes. Hermione read fast. Her eyebrows drew together. From Percy. Ron groaned. Brilliant. What now? Hermione kept reading. Ministry will begin random artifact sweeps in private homes in London districts. New authority under the Accident and Catastrophe Board. Unscheduled entries permitted when risk is flagged by the new model. Ron swore under his breath. They will love this place. Harry stared at the note. Unscheduled entries, right? Hermione folded the parchment and set it down. We ward the house to within an inch of its temper, and we keep records in case they show up with badges and smiles. Ron looked at Harry. And the locket. We do not put it in a place they would think to search first. Harry said, kitchen pantry is too obvious. Under the floorboards is too obvious. He paused. I want to try something first. Hermione closed her eyes for a beat. Careful, we go together. Harry nodded. Together, they climbed again. Same creaks. Same draft under the attic door. The globe of light flared when Hermione entered and settled at a lower glow without being told. Harry crossed to the small trunk. He put the gloves back on and lifted the locket. The warmth returned at once. The marks on the plates held their silence. He turned to Hermione and Ron. I am going to try a question. If it answers, we stop. If it does not, we stop. Hermione nodded and stood to his right with her wand ready. Ron stood to his left, wand drawn, jaw set. Harry brought the locket closer to his chest. He kept his voice even. Who sent you? The warmth did not change. He tried again. Why me? The warmth rose. A low thrum ran along the floor and up through his boots and into his bones. The globe of light dimmed and brightened in a slow rhythm. The marks on the metal lit in short steps. Not a word. A count. Hermione leaned in but did not touch. Is it making a pattern? Ron squinted. Looks like steps on a staircase. Harry felt the rhythm settle into his pulse. His scar itched in the old line. He stood very still. When the last mark lit and went dark, the locket made a soft click. Not a normal clasp. A click from the inside. The attic air grew heavy. The window glass shook. The smell of metal was stronger. The globe of light went down to a thin ring and then back to full. Hermione whispered. Harry put it down. He did not. The warmth had moved past his gloves and into his fingers. It was not hot. It was a clean heat that felt like the first breath after running. He was aware of his spine and his shoulders and the exact weight of the locket and the way the dust hung in the cone of light. He spoke in a voice that did not rise. I accept. The locket opened. No hind. The plates parted and folded into one another without sound. Inside was not a photo or a script or a lock of hair. Inside was a small lens of clear stone set into a ring of fine work. The lens showed nothing. It did not shine. It waited. Hermione lifted her wand. Stop, Harry, please. He looked at her and then at the lens. I think this is not a trap. Ron shifted his grip. You always think that right before it is a trap. Harry swallowed. His mouth tasted of copper again. He held the locket closer. The lens caught the light. For an instant he saw the kitchen downstairs in its surface as if through a window. Then the image slid and showed the square of sky above the attic window. Then it showed darkness that did not belong to the room. Hermione grabbed his sleeve. That is enough. We close it and we lock the trunk and we call Bill now. Harry nodded. All right. He drew breath to speak a closing charm. The lens flashed. The attic dropped away. The light became a narrow line and then nothing. The smell of metal became cold air. His ears popped. The floor was not under his feet. He did not fall. He did not fly. He passed through a gap no wider than a hand. Ron swore and lunged for him but caught his shoulder too late. Hermione's hand slid off his sleeve. Her nails scraped the leather glove and left a small white line. A last sound came with him as he went. A soft whoosh and a single hard crack as the air closed where he had been. Silence filled the attic. The globe of light swung and steadied. The trunk sat open. A thin ring of frost marked the floor where Harry had stood. Hermione stood frozen for 1 second, then moved at once. She snapped a signal spark into the air that burst against the rafters. She threw a set of wards that made the dust jump and settle again. Her breath came fast and her cheeks were white. Ron looked at the open space and then at her. Where did he go? Hermione swallowed. Not far in distance, very far in kind. Ron stared. That is not helpful. She shook her head and looked at the frost ring again. She crouched and touched the edge of it with her wand. The tip smoked. She did not flinch. He is alive, she said. I can feel the echo in the ward I put on him last week. Ron blew out a breath he had been holding. Then we pull him back. How? Hermione stood. She glanced at the trunk and then away. We do not try to force a return without knowing the path. That would tear him. We need help. Ron's mouth twisted. We call Bill. We call Kingsley. We call anyone who has ever read a room with a broken door. Hermione lifted her wand again and her voice steadied. We call Bill first. We lock down the house. We keep this room sealed. And we do not lie to each other. Ron nodded hard. Agreed. He took one last look at the frost ring. He will be cross if we call the whole world and he walks back in on his own. Good, Hermione said. Let him scold me while he drinks tea. She stepped to the door and set a final seal that hummed low and even. The attic air eased a fraction as the spell took hold. They went down together. The house watched them with its old dark patience. The kettle on the hob was still warm. The mug on the table had left a small ring on the wood. Hermione put both hands on the ledger to steady them. Write it, Ron said. She nodded and wrote in neat script. Attic locket opened by Harry. Locket contained lens. Immediate transit effect. Subject removed from room without physical motion. Residual frost at sight. Wards detect life and movement outside normal space. She laid the quill down and closed her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them, she reached for the old wall phone that Arthur had charmed to piggyback on the line to the burrow. It hissed once as magic found the circuit. Bill, she said when the click came. Grimmauld Place. Now, bring a curse kit and a steady hand. No ministry, please. She set the receiver back and looked at Ron. He will be here as fast as he can. Ron sank into the chair by the door. He bent his head and pressed his thumbs into his eyes. I hate this house. We will not be in it long. Hermione said. He will come back. Ron lifted his head. How can you know that? Because he promised. Her voice was quiet but firm. And because whatever took him did not want to hurt him, it wanted him to say yes. Upstairs the sealed room held its cold ring and its open trunk and the last thin taste of copper in the air. Far from the house Harry stood in a corridor with no walls and a floor that felt like solid light under his boots. He could hear his own breath. He could feel the beat in his throat. A new sound rose from somewhere ahead. Not music. A measured thrum that matched his pulse and then led it. A voice spoke from the dark beyond the line of light. Harry James Potter, we have been waiting for you. The words did not echo. They landed and stayed. Harry turned his head and found he could not see the speaker yet. He wet his lips, then opened the door. The light under his boots brightened and moved forward like a path that grew as he walked. He took the first step. Cold air touched his face before sight returned. The floor under his boots was smooth and faintly warm. A low thrum beat in the open space like a steady heart. White lines woke one by one ahead of him, neat and straight, making a path that grew as he moved. Harry swallowed and kept walking. A figure stepped into the light. Robes the color of old parchment. Stern face. Tired eyes that missed nothing. Saul Croaker. The name arrived with certainty. The unspeakable from long ago hearings. A ministry ghost who never gave interviews. Welcome to the Crucible. His voice was even. The room did not have walls in the usual sense. Pressure marked the edges where the light dropped away. Harry could hear his own breath. He could hear a soft hiss like cooled iron. He could smell stone after rain. Where am I? Harry asked. Croaker held his gaze. Not far from home if you mean distance. Very far if you mean function. This place is a hinge. It turns when the right hand presses. Harry glanced down at the white path. It brightened a fraction under his boots, then stilled. You pulled me out of my own house. Croaker nodded once. Your house has done worse to you. He lifted a hand and the light settled into a neat circle around them. We are short on ceremony. You have questions and I will answer the ones that help. We guard balance. Not law, not light, not your fame. Balance, Harry said. Between what? Croaker did not blink. Between noise and silence, between power that runs wild and power that dies. There is a word for the silence. Axiom. You have met its shadow already. He let that sit. The room hummed. The sound seemed to pulse with Harry's chest. You dragged me here to make a speech. No, Croaker said, to make an offer, and to test if you can carry the offer without breaking the floor. Harry waited. You can refuse, Croaker added. Say the word and you go back to your attic and your tea and your friends who love you and suspect you in equal measure. The word did not come. Harry looked at the light again. It did not blind. It just waited. What happens if I stay? Croaker pointed to the far side of the circle. A second path lit there, narrow as a blade. You walk. The room will ask you to count the price of what you think you want. If you pass, you take a place where work is done. Work that never reaches newspapers. Work that saves more than most will ever know exists. And if I fail, you still go home. You remember enough to keep your mouth shut. And you remember the feeling that the work exists for someone else. Croker watched him a moment longer and then stepped back. One more thing. You will not keep all you bring with you. The door asks a toll. Harry wet his lips. You mean a memory? Croker did not look away. I mean cost, nothing more, nothing less. The word cost landed with weight. Harry thought of Voldemort. He thought of the war. He thought of the night in the forest and the way his mother said his name. He felt that old ache rise and he kept it down. I am ready. Croker gave a small nod. We will see. The narrow path brightened. The circle dimmed. Harry set his jaw and walked. The light changed after 10 steps. The air thickened. A smell like burned wool gathered in his nose. A door appeared without hinges or handle. Simply was. It opened with a soft click and the world beyond it was not the Crucible. He stood in a lane that bent around low stone cottages. Snow pressed against the walls in tired piles. Smoke rose from one chimney. At the far end the lane opened into a field that shimmered like heat over road. It was not heat. It was a thin veil of something that made the air quiver. His arm hair lifted. His skin felt tight. A small boy sat on a step with a red scarf around his neck. He had a toy wand and he flicked it at the snow in front of him. A rabbit watched from under a hedge. A woman called from inside the nearest cottage and the boy did not stand. He stuck out his tongue at the snow. The tip was blue from cold. Harry could hear the field hum. The tone bit at his teeth. Croker stood beside him without sound. This is a seam, he said. If it tears it pulls on 5 more. If those go you will watch spells fail and books forget the words inside them for miles. All right, Harry said. How do we seal it? Croker looked at the cottage. The easiest way is to stop the draw. How? Croker spoke as if listing work to a trainee. The hearth in that cottage is linked to an old charm. It pulls more fuel than it should. It is feeding this seam whether the family knows or not. Kill the fire. Fix the seam. Harry started for the door at once. Croker did not move. The charm is bound to the bricks. You can kill the fire by pulling the bricks. The roof comes with it. The woman will die before you can pull her out. The boy might live. Harry stopped. His heart knocked at his ribs. He spoke low. What is the other way? Croker faced the field. You can hold the seam through force until it goes quiet. It will draw through you while you stand. You will be alive when it ends if you do not fall. You will not be useful for weeks. And if I leave the seam, it will tear 5 more. Harry stared at the cottage. He could hear a kettle sing. He could hear the small sound of the boy breathing through his mouth. There is always a third way, he said. Croker did not smile. There is often a fantasy way. Not today. Choose. Harry took 2 steps toward the cottage, then stopped again. He knew what Hermione would say. He knew what Ron would say. He knew what Molly Weasley would say. He knew what his own chest said. He turned and walked to the field. The humming grew sharp. The edge of the seam looked like nothing. A place where sight failed for a finger and then returned. The ground felt like a thin plate under his boots. He slipped his wand from his sleeve and set it inside his palm, so the wood lay straight along the line of his hand. He spoke without looking back. If I fall you pull the boy. Croker did not answer. Harry planted his feet and pressed his free hand into the air above the shimmer. It was like pushing against a door that wanted to be open. Heat ran into his palm. Cold ran up his wrist. The sound grew to a single hard tone that made his teeth ache. He pressed harder. He felt something take hold of him and pull. The world narrowed to breath and sound. The seam pushed and pulled and he pushed back. Sweat ran down his neck. His arm shook. His knees shook. The tone climbed and held like a wire that would not snap. His vision went gray at the edges and he leaned into the force and kept his feet. The tone dropped in a step so sudden it made him gasp. Cold blew across his face. The seam eased like a muscle unclenching. The field stilled. The hum faded. The boy laughed once at a joke inside the house that Harry could not hear. He let his hand fall. He did not fall with it. He bent at the waist and braced his hands on his knees and dragged air into his chest. His fingers cramped. He shook them out. Croker spoke close to his ear. Weeks. Harry straightened slow. He did not look at the cottage. He did not look at the boy. He looked at the field that was now only a field. He said one word. Next, the door took him again with a soft whoosh and a single crack that made him think of the attic. He stood in a circular room with a table in the center. A small shallow bowl sat on the table. The bowl held liquid that was clear until he looked straight at it. Then it clouded like breath on glass. Croker placed something on the table. A stone the size of a knuckle. It was smooth and dark and warm. Harry could feel the warmth without touching it. This is a tithe, Croker said. You have the right to bring what you are into rooms where power is counted. You do not have the right to keep all of it. Harry frowned. What does that mean in plain words? Croker nodded at the bowl. Give one thing that makes you you and we give back the place to do the work. No tricks, no riddles. It will not kill you. It will not be something you can relearn by notes. It is a door that only opens once. Harry stared at the bowl. His mouth was dry. He thought of the forest again. He thought of his mother. He thought of his father. He thought of Sirius. He thought of Ginny. Croker said nothing. The room hummed. There was no clock. There was only the bowl and the stone. Harry reached without rush and set his hand over the water. It cooled the skin above his knuckles. He spoke low. I will give a sound. Croker waited. The sound of my mother saying my name in the forest. The words tasted like iron. His throat hurt. He kept his eyes open. The bowl took the words without splash. The surface rippled once. The cool left his skin. He tried to hear the memory and found a clean space where it had lived. The shape of it remained. The edge and the weight remained. The sound itself did not. Harry stood still. A steady ache moved behind his eyes. He did not wipe at it. Croker set the dark stone in his palm. The warmth spread to his fingers. You choose work over comfort, Croker said. Good. The door opened again. A narrow corridor waited. The floor ran down a small incline. The walls here were visible. They were made of something that ate sound. Only his breath and the soft scuff of his boots reached his ears. He stepped into a room that looked like a war had begun and then hit pause. Broken stone. Fallen arch. A single doorway at the far end holding against a pressure he could not see. A red light crawled along the lines of the doorway and held them closed. The air on his face blew inward. A pull like a slow tide ran against his legs. Ron stood by the doorway. His face was tight and pale. Hermione knelt by a shattered column and worked a spell that refused to set. Her hands were steady and her eyes were cold. Harry knew at once these were not truly his friends. But the sight and the smell and the sound of them were perfect. Hermione did not look up. We need 5 more minutes. Ron looked at Harry and spoke through his teeth. Door will not hold for 5. We can buy 2 if I stand on it. 3 if I break my shoulder again. Harry's mouth was dry. He felt the pull increase. Dust lifted in small threads from the floor and drifted toward the doorway. A stone slid an inch and stopped. He walked to them and did not let himself run. He put his hand on Hermione's shoulder. It was warm and solid. How long do you need to make it stick? She did not look away from the spell. 3 if the door holds. Harry turned to Ron. Hold it. Ron grinned without humor. Knew you would say that. He stepped to the doorway and planted his back against the straining lines. He set his boots and pushed. The red light crawled faster for a second and then steadied. Harry moved to the column and set his wand beside Hermione's. His hand shook. He forced it still. Tell me what to say, she told him. He said it. The stone under the spell hissed. A smell like hot salt hit his nose. The pull on his legs eased, then surged, then eased again. Harry heard a soft pop as something seated inside the wall. Hermione spoke without softness. Again, they worked. The pull grew worse. Ron made a sound through his teeth and did not speak. Harry heard his shoes skitter and resettle. A line of blood ran along Ron's upper arm where the stone had caught skin. It moved slow in the red light. The spell seeded a second piece with a sound like a click deep under the floor. The pull dropped in half and then rose in a single whip that threw dust into the air and made Harry's eyes water. He blinked and did not lose the line of the charm. He felt his stomach turn and held it down. Hermione said one word. Now, they pressed the last shape into place together. The door took one heavy breath that made every stone in the room creak, and then it held. The red light went steady and then dimmed to a thin thread. The pull stopped. Ron slid down the frame and sat on the floor hard. He held his arm and laughed once with no joy in it. "Hate doors," he said. His voice shook. Harry turned and reached for him and stopped with his hand in the air. The room froze. The breath of the place went away. The light did not change, but it felt less true. Croaker stood where the door had been. His eyes did not judge. "That is enough." The room blinked out with a soft crack. Harry was in the circle again. The air in the crucible felt thin and clean. His chest heaved. Sweat cooled on his back. His hands hurt. His throat hurt. He wanted water more than he wanted answers. Croaker held out a small flask. Harry took it. The water tasted faintly of salt and something sweet he could not name. "You told him to hold a door that would break him," Croaker said. Harry nodded. "He is my friend. He would do it without being told. Telling him made it honest." Croaker looked at him for a long count. "People say honest when they mean not pretty." He set his hands behind his back. "You passed the seam. You paid a tithe. You ordered harm for a friend to stop collapse. The room accepts that you understand the arithmetic." Harry closed his eyes for a second. The ache behind them did not move. "Open your eyes," Croaker said. "This is the part where I warn you, and make sure you hear the warning while the pressure is still in your bones." Harry did. Croaker stepped closer. "We do not chase glory. We do not collect names. We do not win in ways that feel like stories. We hold against failure. We accept stain so most can go about their days. If you want light and applause, say no now, and I will respect you, and I will send you home with tea and quiet guilt." Harry took a breath in through his nose and let it out through his mouth. The memory of his mother calling his name was gone from his ear, and it would stay gone. The space it had lived in was clean and bare and honest. He said one word. "Yes." Croaker studied him a heartbeat more and then reached into his sleeve. He took out a narrow strip of dull metal. It looked like nothing special. He held it between thumb and forefinger. "Your cipher," Croaker said. "It is not a toy or a badge. It is a key that only fits when you speak it clean." He pressed the strip to the inside of Harry's left wrist. There was no burn. There was a small pressure and a cool wave that moved up his arm and into his chest and down his spine and out his toes. Harry sucked in a breath. Croaker spoke the words once. "Count the cost and hold the line. Say it." Harry repeated it. The metal strip sank into his skin without mark. He felt a small new beat join his pulse. Not faster, just present. "There are degrees of knowledge," Croaker said. "You are an initiate. You will see what you need to stand where we tell you to stand. You will not see the whole book. Truth flows up. Duty flows down. You will get used to that and hate it in equal measure." Harry nodded. "I work with people I trust." "You will work with people who have earned trust by doing the thing when it hurts," Croaker said. "Trust that lives in speeches gets men killed." The light around them widened by a hand. The hum in the room softened. "I know your mind will jump to your friends now," Croaker said. He did not smile. "Good. Keep them. Bring them when it helps. Leave them when it would break them. Hermione will ask questions that save lives. Ron will choose a side and hold it when smarter men blink. Name them in your head as assets if that helps you keep them safe." Harry's mouth pulled into a line. "Do not call them assets to their faces. I am not 6. Croaker actually huffed a soft sound that might have been a laugh. "You will train next. 2 tracks, sight and stone. Forenza will show you how to read the sky without becoming a poet. Bill will show you how to bind old work without waking it too hard. Griphook may speak once and give you a truth that rusts if you ignore it." Harry felt something ease inside his shoulders at hearing those names. Canon faces. People he could picture walking through a door. Croaker stepped back. "Last thing for today. The room does not like to end on easy notes." A wall rose at the edge of the circle. It was smooth and pale and clean. In the center a small square opened. Behind it he saw a single object on a stand. The locket from the attic. Its plates were closed now. The tiny marks on the surface sat like quiet steps waiting to be climbed. Harry felt the skin on his wrist cool under the cipher. "This belongs to us," Croaker said, "and to you. It found you because you are a point where lines meet. There are others. You will not like all the ways they work. You will learn to accept that not liking and not stopping can be the same choice." Harry stared at the locket. His chest felt tight and open at once. What did it take from me to bring me here? Croaker shook his head. The house simply said yes. The lens picked a path you would accept. We handle the rest. Harry pulled his eyes from the locket. You are very careful with what you tell me. Croaker nodded once. I am. He made a small gesture and the wall closed again without a seam. The circle returned to its first size. Here is the rule you will hate and follow. Croaker said. No one is allowed to be bigger than the work. Not you, not me, not the codes, not the creed. You will recite it in your sleep before the end of the month. Harry breathed through the ache that ran across his shoulders and down his back. He thought of Hermione in the attic. He thought of Ron swearing at the frost ring. He thought of Bill moving through a curse room with steady hands. He thought of the boy on the step with the red scarf and the way the kettle had sung. When do I go back? Croaker looked at the white path that led away into nothing. When you say the words. Harry blinked. Count the cost and hold the line, he said. The light under his boots brightened. The room leaned toward him. The cold air touched his face again and then warmed. One more thing, Croaker said as the light grew. Harry looked at him. If I live long enough to change my mind about the work, I will do it with more grace than the last man who tried. It sounded like a promise and like a warning. It sounded like a man who had watched doors for too long. The light reached Harry's eyes and washed out Croaker and the room and the hum and the smell of stone after rain. It narrowed to a white thread. It snapped with a crack like ice. He was in the attic. The globe of light swung on its charm. The frost ring was thinner now and uneven. The trunk sat open. The air smelled of metal and dust. Hermione and Bill stood inside a tight set of wards that made his skin prickle. Ron held a coil of rope he had not used. Bill's hair was pulled back and his eyes were sharp and calm. Hermione made a small sound that could have been his name and stopped herself from running to him because the wards still hummed. Harry lifted his left wrist so they could see there was skin and no blood. He stepped to the edge of the frost ring and stopped there. I am here, he said, came out hoarse. He knew why and he did not say it yet. Bill nodded once like a craftsman who had known it would work and still felt relief. Tell me what you touched, he said. Everything, Harry said. He looked at Hermione and at Ron and at the locket in the trunk. And tell me what you let go, Hermione said. Her voice was soft. It did not break. Harry swallowed. The ache behind his eyes sat there like a small weight. He did not hide it. A sound, he said. Hermione did not ask which. She knew better than to ask a man to point at an empty place. He stepped across the frost ring and the wards settled around him like rain that decided not to fall. He felt the small second beat at his wrist keep time with his heart. Bill watched his face and then the locket and then the frozen edge on the floor. We need tea and a room that does not hum, he said. We need questions in the right order. Harry nodded. We need to count the cost. Hermione heard the cadence and her eyes flicked to his wrist. She was too quick not to hear code when it walked into her kitchen. She spoke plain. You do not get to carry this alone. He breathed out and felt some of the stone in his chest move. All right, he said. Tell me what the ministry wants today. Ron grimaced. New sweep plan for private homes. Random visits when their clever model says jump. Bill snorted. Their clever model loves this address. Harry closed the trunk without touching the locket. The lid settled with a quiet hush. We will work faster, he said. He looked at Bill. And quieter. Bill gave a thin grin. Music to my ears. He pointed at the floor. Your frost ring tells me you went through a tight door and back again. Next time we ask for a door that opens both ways before anyone steps. Harry nodded once. Next time I ask for a hand on my sleeve that is stronger than mine. Ron lifted the rope. Already planned that. Harry smiled for real then. Small and tired and real. Hermione reached for the ledger on the work table and then stopped halfway. We do not write this yet, she said. We drink tea first. Harry looked around the attic. The dust. The light. The ring that would fade in an hour. The trunk with the quiet metal inside. He heard the crucible hum in a place only he could hear, and then he did not hear it because the house took the sound and made it part of itself. He turned to the stairs. Tea, he said. Bill followed. Ron clapped his shoulder once. Hermione walked at his side and kept step with his breath. In the kitchen the kettle clicked and the old pipes rattled and the smell of dry leaves calmed the room. Bill laid tools on the table with precise hands. Ron set out cups. Hermione watched Harry's hands for tremor and saw a little one and chose not to say a word. Harry lifted his mug. "Count the cost and hold the line," he said under his breath where only he could hear it. The second pulse in his wrist agreed. The house kept its stale air and its secrets and one new rule that had been said aloud. He sipped and let the heat quiet the ache in his throat. He did not tell them yet about the man who had promised to change his mind one day. That could wait until after sleep. Or until the next door asked for more than he had left. For now he was here. For now the room did not hum. For now that was enough. The door opened before his hand reached it. Warm air moved across his face. The room beyond was round and tall. The ceiling held a firm sky full of moving points. Not a painting. The points shifted by the breath. Lines joined them and slid apart in clean steps. The floor was bare stone. A low table stood under the sky. Firenze stood at the table. His coat shone clean. His eyes were steady and calm. "You came back in one piece." Harry stopped just inside the threshold. "Mostly." Firenze nodded toward the ceiling. "Look up." Harry did. The points crossed and held and crossed again. His eyes adjusted. A thin hum ran through the space. The lines in the sky matched the tone. "What am I seeing?" "A map of strain," Firenze said. "Not just stars. Places where the world bends more than it should." He tapped the table with one finger and the tone climbed. The points drifted a hand. "You were told a story about fate," he said. "It was narrow. This is wider. Paths and timing. Force and rest. None of it binds you. All of it presses on you." Harry kept his eyes on the sky. "So it is not a prophecy room." "No," Firenze said. "It is a weather room." He pointed at 3 bright points that sat in a neat triangle and refused to move with the others. "Count them." 3. 3 is a problem," Firenze said. 3 is a set that holds even when the rest shrugs. He let his hand fall. "You held a seam in a field yesterday. The room knows it. It changes the map today." Harry looked back at him. "You knew." "I was told the result," Firenze said. "Not the cost." Harry rolled his sore shoulder. "Cost was real." "Good," Firenze said. "Real cost teaches better than words." He stepped beside Harry and lifted his chin with a small gesture. "Follow that line there." Harry tracked a thin path from one bright point to another. The line touched a faint ring on the edge of the sky and dimmed there. "What is that ring?" "An old barrier," Firenze said. "It kept the first damage from eating the garden." Harry frowned. Plain words. It kept a breach from turning towns into glass and names into blank pages. Harry felt the skin on his arms prickle. "Who said it?" "People who did not sign ministry forms," Firenze said. "People who grew tired and stopped having names that mattered to anyone but their friends." He let the silence sit for a count, then pointed back to the table. "Tell me what you think this room is for." Harry spoke slow. "You stand here and decide where to stand next." Firenze gave a small nod. "You already count cost when you look at a map. We are going to give you a way to count faster and cleaner." He placed a slate on the table. Chalk marks showed lines and numbers. No fancy script. No riddles. "I am not going to test you on poems," he said. "I am going to test you on nerve and simple sums." Harry let out a breath he did not know he was holding. "Good," he said. "Poems were never my thing." Firenze reached for a small brass pointer and set the tip to a dim cluster near the edge. "This is where erosion will show next if we sit on our hands," he said. "Is that a prediction?" "It is a risk," Firenze said. "A risk is enough to move." He turned to Harry. "Say your creed." Harry hesitated and then spoke plain. "Count the cost and hold the line." "Good," Firenze said. "Now ask yourself what it costs to move there and what it costs to ignore it." Harry stared at the points until his eyes blurred. He blinked once and the lines steadied again. "We move because cost to ignore it stacks fast," he said. Firenze did not smile. "You have the right instinct. We will teach you to prove your instinct to a room that likes proof." A soft knock came from the far door. Bill Weasley stepped in with a case in one hand and a calm look in his eyes. His scar caught the light and then gave it back. Firenze gave him the barest nod and then looked at Harry. "This room gives you sight. Bill gives you stone." He turned back to the sky. "We will talk again after he has put iron in your hands." Bill set the case on the table and clicked the latches. No show. No flourish. He opened the lid and peeled back a cloth. Inside lay a narrow rod the length of Harry's forearm. 5 thin rings sat around the rod. Each ring had small cut marks on the rim. A line of pale metal ran from end to end. Bill looked at Harry first, not the tool. "How is the arm, sir?" "Good," Bill said. "That means your nerves still tell the truth." He lifted the rod with both hands and set it gently on the table. "What is it?" "A line staff," Bill said. "Not a wand, not a toy, useful and dangerous. It reads lay flow and can bend a bit of it without tearing the rest." Harry kept his hands to himself. "What is the cost?" Bill pointed to the rings. "Each ring has ticks. Every tick is a breath you can draw through the staff into a ground you set. Pull past the last tick and you make a dead zone, and you do not want that unless you are closing a door." He set a small tin on the table and opened it. Salt sat inside. He shook some onto the stone in a tight circle. He took out 8 iron nails and placed them at even points around the circle. "First lesson," Bill said. "Never put power through a room without a ground." He pointed to the salt and nails. "This is simple and it works. We can do clever grounds later when you stop shaking." Harry looked at his right hand. The habit gave him away. Bill saw it and said nothing. He set a small compass inside the circle. The needle was not magnetic. Pointed at the air and then settled toward the floor. Harry watched the needle. "That is flow," Bill said. "You do not have to see it with your eyes to believe it exists. Eyes lie when we are tired. This lies less." He rolled the staff toward Harry. "Pick it up." Harry reached out. The metal felt cool and smooth. The rings shifted a finger under his grip and then stilled. A quiet vibration ran through his palm and up his wrist to the place where the cipher slept under his skin. It did not burn. It did not sting. It made itself known and then went back to silence. "Grip the 3rd ring," Bill said. "Move it a notch and then stop." Harry did. The needle in the compass turned a few degrees and settled again. The nails clicked once as if they had thought about jumping and decided not to. "You feel that?" Bill asked. "Yes." "Good," Bill said. "That is the easy kind. Do not get drunk on it." Harry looked up. "I will not." Bill gave a short nod. "Now move the 4th ring a notch and watch the floor." Harry moved the ring. The stone under the salt made a sound. Not loud. A small crack like a hot plate kissed by cold water. The air around the circle cooled. The needle swung again and then held where the new line pointed. Bill kept his voice even. "Tell me what you would do if you had to stop a draw that could take a town." Harry spoke without pause. "I would drain a safe place and feed the draw with that and then cut the draw when it is full and slow." Bill kept his eyes on him for a beat. "You say safe place as if it is an easy call." "It is not," Harry said. Bill nodded. "Good." He reached into the case and pulled a cloth-bound book. He set it next to the circle. "Griphook got this for us," Bill said. "He wanted me to say his name once so you know he was not being used in silence." Harry glanced at the book and then at Bill. "He trusts you. He trusts the work," Bill said. "Trust me later when I deserve it." He opened the book to a page of clean diagrams and clear words. He tapped a section at the top. "Ledger," he said. "Every time you move a ring you write it down with where and when and why. You count how much the room paid and how much you took. If there is no paper you say it aloud and someone writes it when your hands stop shaking." Harry nodded again. "I can do that." Bill looked past him to the sky and then back. "You will say it when you do not want to say it. That is the point." A soft bell sounded from the wall. Firenze lifted his head and then lowered it again. "He has a message," Firenze said. "Take it here or take it in the hall." "Here," Harry said. He felt the small pulse in his wrist change pace. The cipher warmed and cooled in one slow roll. The bell sounded again and a pane of clear air formed over the table. Letters came in clean white lines. "Not many. We are fine." Hermione wrote, "Eat, drink water. Tell me one true thing you learned and one price you paid." Harry smiled in spite of his tight chest. He spoke for the room. "The map shows strain so we can move first." And I gave a sound. Hermione wrote back at once. "I hear the gap, but I do not need to fill it." "I am proud of you." Ron added a short line. "Tell Bill to stop stealing my words in hard voices." Bill smiled with just one corner of his mouth. "Cheek," he said. "I pay in tea. Tell him that." Harry read it aloud. The pain cleared. The cipher cooled again. Firenze watched him write and speak and almost smile. "Keep that link," he said. "It keeps men human inside rooms that do not care." He pointed back at the ceiling. 2 lines just bent. "We will talk in an hour." Bill clapped his hands once. "We are ready for the right." Harry felt his stomach tighten. How bad is it? Bill did not soften it. It will hurt. It will not break you unless you lie to the staff while you hold it. Harry wiped his palms on his trousers. What does that mean? If you try to pretend you have more left than you do, the staff will pull the truth out of your bones. So do not lie, Harry said. Bill nodded. Come on then. They moved to a second space where the floor was scored by old work. The stone had hairline lines cut into it in a circle the size of a small room. Bill spread salt along the lines with steady hands. He placed iron nails at set points until the pattern made a clean wheel. He set the compass at the edge and watched the needle settle. Then he handed Harry a small plain ring of iron. Put that on, so your hand remembers what iron feels like when your head goes light. Harry slid it on his right ring finger. Felt heavy and plain. Stand there, Bill said, feet on the marks. Harry stepped onto two small cuts in the stone. They grounded him at once. He could feel the floor under the skin of his feet now. Not just the soles. All the way up his legs. Up his back. Into his neck. Bill placed the staff across his palms. Hold it level. Breathe. When I say take the first ring, you do not yank. You nudge. If anything feels wrong, you say wrong. Do not worry about pride. I have already seen you at your worst when you were 14 and full of bright ideas. Harry huffed a breath that almost counted as a laugh. Ready, Bill said. Take the first ring a notch. Harry moved it. The needle moved. The air cooled. The salt lines settled. Again, Harry moved the second ring. The floor made that small crack again and then went quiet. Take the third ring. Harry moved it. A cold pain ran up his arms and down into his ribs. He gritted his teeth. Sweat broke across his face at once. Bill stood beside the circle and watched every twitch. Voice, he said. Wrong. Harry said. Good. Bill reached out and twisted the fourth ring back a hair. Breathe. Harry breathed. The pain dropped to a level he could hold. You are at 3 notches deep, Bill said. We go to 4, then we stop. You are not a hero in this room. You are a man who wants to see tomorrow. Harry nodded. The iron ring bit his finger and kept the world solid. He moved the fourth ring a small step. The needle swung and then set. A new tone entered the air. Not loud. High. It made his eyes water. His hands shook. He spoke through it. I can hold. Bill waited a count. Hold for 5 and then back a hair. He counted down with his fingers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Harry eased the ring back. The tone softened. Warmth returned to his fingers. Bill stepped into the circle and took the staff from him. That is enough for today. Harry swallowed twice to work spit back into his mouth. What did we do? You gave the staff a taste of your pulse and let it give you a taste of the lines. It will find you faster next time, and it will steal more from you if you let it. Harry wiped his face with his sleeve. I feel sick. Bill handed him a clean cloth and then a tin cup of water. Drink. Harry drank. The water tasted of tin and salt. The tone in the room did not go away. It changed. It moved from the floor to the air to a place behind his teeth. Bill heard it too. His eyes cut to the compass. The needle jumped twice and then held steady, pointing south and a touch east. He set the staff back in the case and closed the lid. He spoke in a voice that did not rise. We have a target. Firenze stepped in from the map room. Where? Bill pointed at the needle. South and a little east. Close enough to walk if you want to waste time. We will not, Firenze said. He lifted his eyes to the ceiling. 3 points near the edge dimmed. 2 brightened. The hum shifted to match. He looked at Harry. You need 20 minutes of food and a bandage for that hand. Harry looked down. Blood ran from his knuckles where the iron ring had bit skin. I did not feel it. Pain hides when the room sings, Bill said. Hermione sent a message. Firenze added. She wrote that Kingsley will announce new sweeps by teams inside the city this week. Bill grunted. We knew they would. Harry flexed his hand once and then stopped when the cut split. So we move before that starts. Firenze nodded. We move now. Bill passed him a strip of clean cloth and tape. Harry wrapped his hand. No one fussed. No one told a joke to make the air light. The tone from the compass kept them plain. Bill looked him over with quick eyes. You can stand. Yes. You can think. Yes. You can say stop if the staff pulls too much. Yes. Bill snapped the case shut. The sound made the room flinch and then relax. Go tell Hermione where we are headed and what we aim to do. Firenze said, use 6 words. She will read the rest from the choice of words. Harry called the pane. White letters waited. Southeast line check now together. He sent it. A single word flashed back. Back. He knew what she meant. Come back in one piece. Come back honest. Come back without new secrets he could have avoided. He shut the pane with a breath. Firenze led them through a short hall that smelled of damp stone and ink. A guard with no name opened the far door and closed it behind them without a word. Stairs dropped to a narrow platform where a small cart stood ready. Bill swung the case in and held out a hand. Harry climbed in with slow care. Firenze took the far seat and sat with perfect balance. The cart moved with a low growl and then a rush. Cold wind hit Harry's face and made his eyes tear. Stone blurred. The tone from the compass hung in the air even here. Bill leaned toward him so he could hear over the rush. One more thing, he said. If you feel a pull that feels sweet, tell me at once. Harry frowned. Sweet, he said. Bill nodded. Some lines sing in a way that makes you want to give them more. They take men like you first because you think you can pay. Harry let the warning sink until it had weight. He nodded. I will say it if I feel it. The cart slowed. The air changed from tunnel to open room. Cold wet smell. Iron and old brick. Bill killed the lantern and let his eyes adjust. Firenze stood without needing a rail. He raised one hand and the map in the air above his palm showed 3 weak points and 1 stronger one. We start there, he said. He pointed to a shadowed arch where water dripped in slow beats. Bill set the case on a dry box and clicked it open. He put the staff in Harry's hands and laid out a circle with salt and 8 nails on the wet brick. He set the compass and watched the needle swing and hold. He never rushed. He never stalled. This is yours, Bill said. I will speak. You will move. Firenze watched the arch and the dark beyond it. He spoke without looking back. Say your creed. Harry said it. The tone in his wrist matched the compass for 1 long count and then settled. He set his feet on the marks in the wet and lifted the staff. His arms still shook from the right. He did not lie to the tool about the shake. Bill spoke in a tone that kept Harry's head clear. First ring a notch. Harry moved it. Cold ran up his arm. The arch breathed in. Water pulled toward the line and then sagged back. The needle swung. Second ring a notch. Harry moved it. The room made that small hot and cold crack and then held. Third ring half a notch. Harry moved it less. The breath in the arch evened. The drip slowed and kept time with the tiny beat in his wrist. He felt a small draw on his chest and named it. Pull is clean, he said. Bill nodded. Hold for 5 and then back a hair. Firenze did not turn. He spoke to the dark. We feel you, he said. There was no answer any ear could hear. The arch creaked once. The cold in the room bit harder and then eased. Harry eased the ring back. The staff cooled. His hands stopped shaking for a breath and then began again in a smaller way. Bill took the staff from him and cradled it as if it were a sleeping thing that could wake wrong. Well done, he said. Harry breathed and felt the ache in his throat from the tithe that would never go away and let it sit without touching it. Firenze lowered his hand. The map above his palm cleared. The 3 weak points dimmed. The stronger one dimmed a shade and then brightened in a short pulse. He looked at Bill and Harry. 1 more, he said, then food. Harry nodded and reached for the staff again. The tone rose before he touched it. The compass needle swung back to point south and a sharp step toward east. The nails in the circle clicked twice. Something in the brick under their feet answered with a dull thud. Bill did not look up. We have company, he said in a flat voice, not men. The line itself. Firenze took 2 long steps and stood between the arch and the circle. Hold until I say break, he said. Harry set his feet and took the first ring. Cold jumped up his bones. The arch pulled hard enough to move the wet on the floor toward it in a thin slide. The needle hit the stop and pressed there. Bill stood at his shoulder. Half a notch on the 4th. Harry moved it. Pain hit like a clean spike through his palms and wrists and teeth. Not a story word. A fact. He did not bite his tongue. He breathed. He spoke. Holding, the pull grew sweeter. Not nice. Just easy to give into. He named it so the room would hear that he knew. Sweet. Bill touched his elbow and left his hand there so Harry could feel human heat and not only the draw. Stay with me, Bill said. Harry nodded. The tone climbed. The arch whined. The brick under the salt seated a finger and then came back. The nails clicked once more and then went quiet. Firenze lifted his hand. Break. Harry eased the fourth ring back a hair. The tone dropped. The air warmed a shade. The pull did not end. It sagged and then tried again. Break, Firenze said again. Harry took the third ring back. The needle drifted toward center. The arch breathed out and stayed out. The pulse in his wrist matched his breath and then pulled ahead and then matched again. Bill took the staff. His hands were careful. He set it in the case. He shut the lid. He did not click the latches this time. Firenze still faced the arch. He spoke in a voice the room accepted. We held you today. We hold you tomorrow. He turned to Harry. Harry let his head fall forward for one count. He lifted it again. He tasted salt on his lips. His hands ached. His back ached. His chest felt cold and then warm as if the room had decided to be kind for a minute. Bill handed him a wrapped bar. It was dense and awful and exactly what he needed. He took a bite and forced it down. Firenze looked at the map again. The points moved, he said. Not much. Enough. He turned his eyes back to Harry. Training continues after an hour. You will sleep after that if you do not argue. Harry did not argue. He chewed and made himself drink water. The compass needle did not sit still. It twitched a hair to the east and settled. Twitched again. Bill followed the line with his eyes. We are not done for the day, he said. Harry finished the bar. Good, he said. He lifted his wrapped hand and looked at the cut. Blood had stopped. The skin around it was white from the cold of the line. Hermione will ask for one true thing and one price, he said to no one. Bill heard him. Tell her this. We reduced pull at 2 arches and the staff took a bite out of you but left the bone. Harry nodded. He felt the room ease. He felt the second beat in his wrist settle. He let the breath out slow. Not a trick. Just a clean breath. The compass needle jumped hard to the east and held there. Firenze watched it for a count. We move, he said. Cliffhanger achieved. The door to the Gringotts interview room shut with a soft click that sounded final. No windows. Stone walls that looked like a vault had been hollowed into a cube. A single table. 2 chairs. An oil lamp that did not flicker. Bill had escorted Harry through 3 checks and then said he would wait outside with his case and a patient look. The goblin on the threshold had counted the seconds out loud as if time itself were a ledger entry. Draco Malfoy arrived 3 minutes late and made lateness look deliberate. Pale hair pulled back. Black robes that were plain in a way that cost money. No ring on his fingers. He looked at the chair, then at Harry, then sat without asking. We are not friends, Draco said. Good, Harry answered. We are not enemies either. Draco tilted his head. We were for years. Now we are customers, Harry said. The lamp hummed. Draco let the silence hold long enough to set the tone, then folded his hands. You want something from the manor. You came to the only person who can walk you in without the wards deciding to turn you into tasteful ash. Harry did not blink. You want something too. Draco smiled without his eyes joining in. Protection dressed as purpose. There it is. He leaned back. Tell me what you think is hidden under my roof. Harry kept his voice level. A piece of a book that was never bound. Draco considered that for a beat. The Codex. He said the word as if it were old wine he had once tasted and never admitted to liking. I have heard versions of that story my whole life. Old men and older women with rings that could blind a room talked about rules they would never write down. He made a short motion with 2 fingers. You think the ministry held our leash. They never did. Harry watched him. You kept copies of rules in walls. No, Draco said. Not rules, maps. He paused. And debts. He rested his elbows on the table. I will not ask you why you want this piece. You will only say balance in a serious voice and I will pretend the word is new to me. Harry said nothing. Draco tapped the tabletop once. Here is the price. If you find a record of my family dealing with your quiet friends, I get a copy. If you find an oath with my name on it, you bring it to me first. If you find something that can burn the last of our name, you at least give me the courtesy of a minute to decide if I deserve it. Harry held his gaze. You get a copy of anything that is only about your house. You do not get a copy of any procedure or tool that can close a door. Draco lifted one brow. You think I want to play with your doors? Harry kept his tone even. I think you like control. Draco smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. So do you? The lamp hummed again. It made the stone feel closer. Harry spoke. We enter tonight. Draco nodded once. You listen to me when my name opens the way. You do not grandstand to impress yourself. You do not test a ward to prove you are brave. Harry waited a beat. I need to know where it is. Draco let the question pass him and land on the wall. If I tell you here, and you hurt me later, I die twice. Harry held up his left wrist and let the thin beat under his skin make itself known to the other man in the room without words. I answer to a thing that punishes speeches, he said. Draco watched the small pulse, then looked back up. That is almost convincing. He stood. We meet on the road outside Wiltshire at the stand of beech trees that looks like a crooked crown. You will bring the curse man if you must. He paused. You will not bring the whole old gang. I am not interested in reliving school with better clothes. The door opened without a knock. Bill stood in the gap, case in hand, glance quick, jaw setting calm. That is my cue, Draco said. He walked past Bill with a nod that was almost polite. After the door shut again, Bill set the case on the table. You let him drive the terms. Harry shook his head. He thinks he did. Bill looked at his face for a long second. Good. He clicked the latches and lifted the lid. The line staff lay inside like a tool that knew it did work. Griphook is content to let this happen, Bill said. Content for a goblin does not look like a smile. We keep it quiet and respectful, and we do not light any flags. Harry nodded. We move before the ministry launches sweeps. Bill gave a dry smile. You read my note. He shut the lid. Eat and rest for 1 hour. Then we go to Grimmauld and you say your piece to Hermione before you try to sneak out. Harry let out a breath. I was not going to sneak. You were thinking about it, Bill said. If you tell her you are walking into the manor without her, she will set you on fire and then put you out and then marry you. Harry looked at the floor because that made him smile, and he did not want to look like a man who smiled at vows when he was about to break into a house. Back at Grimmauld Place, the kitchen smelled of toast and damp wood. Ron sat with a newspaper that had given up pretending to be useful and started wrapping cutlery to feel important. Hermione stood by the range with her sleeves rolled and a sharp look that softened when Harry walked in. You met him, she said. Harry nodded. He wants copies if we find his family names in the walls. He wants notice if we find an oath with his name on it. He wants a minute to decide who he is before the world does it for him. Hermione listened without interrupting. When he finished, she spoke slow. Say what you are not saying. Harry leaned on the counter. He is not chasing redemption. He is buying a future with the one thing he still has, access and old debts. Ron snorted. At least he is honest about being a snake. Hermione shot him a look. Stop with the school names. We left that building and we will not bring it back in here. Ron lifted his hands. Fine. She turned to Harry again. Are you taking me? Harry met her eyes. Yes. She waited. As far as the old outer wards, he said. Not inside. Ron sat up. You are still trying to sneak. Harry shook his head. I need Draco to believe he can walk me through without a voice in his ear that he thinks is mine. Hermione held his gaze. You want him to risk something for real. You think he will only do it if he feels alone with you. Yes. Hermione drew in a breath and let it out. Then here are my rules. You keep Bill within reach. You do not speak the creed while your head is full of sweet pull. You write a ledger entry with your mouth if you cannot hold a quill. You do not let Draco talk you into a choice that hurts someone to teach you a lesson. She paused. And when you come back, you let me argue every part of it before you sleep. Harry stepped closer. You will have my side of the table and a pen. She nodded. Good. Ron looked between them. What am I doing? Bill answered from the doorway. You are doing what you do best. You are holding a line and watching the ground and spotting anyone who thinks a badge makes them smart. Ron grinned. Now that I can do. Hermione poured tea and pushed a mug to Harry. Eat the toast. You always forget to eat on days that end with stupid doors. Harry obeyed. The bread was dry. It steadied his stomach anyway. Night took the city in a slow sweep. By the time they reached the road to Wiltshire, the air had a bite and the hedgerows made long black shapes. The beech stand looked like a crown against the dim sky. Draco waited under it with his cloak close and his wand hidden in plain sight. Bill stood with him and looked like a man out for a walk who had once taken curses in the desert and learned to look bored for safety. Draco eyed the case. I assume that is not a picnic. Bill did not return the smile. It only comes out when we want the earth to tell the truth. Draco nodded as if he approved of the phrasing. We will walk from here. He looked at Harry. You keep 2 steps behind me and do not breathe like a hero when we touch the first ring. They moved off the road. Wet grass brushed their boots. A low wall rose and fell along the field line and turned into old stone steps that looked older than the manor. Draco placed his palm on the top step and waited. The stone warmed under his hand and then cooled. Family wards no blood and intent, he said. Right now they know I do not want the house to eat you. We will see how long it cares to honor that. They crested a small rise and the manor came into view. Pale in the night. Long and too perfect. Windows like shut eyes. No torches. The air over the roofline shimmered in a way the normal eye would miss. Harry felt the pull before they reached the gate. A slow draw at the edge of his skin like a tide that did not care about men. He named it to keep his head. Pull is clean. Draco shot him a short look. Do not say that in front of my father if he ever remembers how to stand in a room. They reached a small iron gate worked with a crest. Draco did not touch the crest. He put his fingers on the hinge instead and whispered something old and private. The gate sighed open as if it were tired of the show. They stayed on the gravel drive for 3 turns and then left it for a narrow path through clipped hedges. The smell of wet earth and old leaves mixed with a faint trace of smoke from years when men had walked this way with cigars and told jokes at the expense of people with less land. Draco stopped at a square of lawn that looked like every other square of lawn and lifted his chin. Here, Bill murmured. So this is the outer hidden ring. Draco almost smiled. We called it the hedge mask when I was little and was allowed to listen to the boring bits. He crouched and pressed 2 fingers into the ground. Harry felt the pull change and press sideways. Draco stood and took 1 step into the empty air. His foot landed on something that did not look like a step and held. He did not look back. Follow my heel exactly. They crossed nothing as if it were stairs. The air pressed on Harry's ears and then eased. The house vanished behind a curtain that would have looked like mist if there were light to catch it. Ahead the lawn became a long shadowed garden no one saw from the road. A line of black yews stood like sentries. A fountain in the shape of a snake had no water and no pride left in it. Draco led them to a small door set in stone that looked older than the manor itself. He drew a slim key from his sleeve. Do not be impressed, he said. This only opens wood. He turned the key. The lock sighed as if a person had been woken from a chair. The door opened without a creak. Inside the air was cool and tasted of clean dust. A corridor ran under the house. Lamps on the walls woke as they walked and went dark behind them. The floor had been kept swept even when the rest of the house had been left to sulk. Their steps were the only sound. Draco spoke without looking back. When the war ended we sealed rooms that had been used for work that no one wanted to admit had ever been done. We did not seal the old things that had names before this house had walls. We were not allowed to. He turned left at a junction and then left again. The corridor widened into a square chamber with 4 doors. Each door had a plate with a single set of marks. No runes. Not numbers. Short strokes like the locket plates had carried. Harry felt the tiny beat at his wrist answer those marks and then settle down as if it had nodded and sat again. Bill leaned in. Same hand as the locket. Draco did not blink. You are not here by accident. He pointed to the door on the right. That one. Harry stepped to it. The marks warmed his skin without heat. He set his palm on the wood. The door did not open. He looked at Draco. Say your phrase, Draco said, slow and honest. Harry let breath out and spoke low. Count the cost and hold the line. The door opened without a sound. A small room waited. A table in the center. A stone shelf along the back wall. No windows. No dust on the table. A ledge had been cut into the wall above the shelf. On the ledge sat a flat box the size of a book. Draco stayed in the threshold. If you break a ward in here it will mark my name forever. Harry crossed to the table and stopped. The box did not hum. It did not glow. It sat as if someone had placed it there yesterday and told it to behave. He reached for it and felt nothing until his fingers were an inch away. Then he felt a steady pressure like the weight of a hand on his shoulder. Not hard. Present. Bill stood at his right shoulder and spoke with that careful calm. Ground. Harry slid a ring of salt on the table in a tight circle with steady hands. He set 8 small iron nails at even marks with the tips pointed inward. The air in the room changed at once. The pressure lifted a little and settled as if it had found a chair. He lifted the lid. Inside lay 3 thin sheets of something that was not paper. Clear. Stiff. Marks ran across them in clean lines. No curves. No flourishes. Short strokes that made grids and paths and counted nothing and everything at once. The top sheet showed a pattern Harry recognized now without being able to say why. Lines he had felt under streets. Turns he had taken with the staff. Draco did not breathe. Family men used to come back from long talks with old friends and not talk to their wives for days. He said, "Now I know why." Harry glanced at him. "You do not get copies of procedures." Draco lifted one shoulder. "I get a copy of any mention of my house." Bill leaned in closer to the sheets without touching them. "These are not procedures," he said. "These are maps and agreements." He pointed at a small block of the same short strokes in the corner. "That is a ledger of exchanges." He paused. "Read it with your fingers and not your eyes." Harry reached out. The marks looked like cuts. They felt like old decisions. He did not hear words. He felt weight. Places where men had stood and paid. Places where men had refused and lost. He felt the pull of the lines and the hurt of closing them in the wrong spot and the cold of a dead zone built on purpose so a city could sleep. He swallowed. "Do not get lost," Bill murmured. "Pull back and breathe." Harry drew his hands away. The weight eased. The room came back into air and walls and men. Draco spoke in a quiet voice. "Does it say Malfoy?" Harry looked again at the corner. The small block of strokes changed when he looked for that word. Not to letters. To a feeling that had edge and pride and fear and duty that had been made into arrogance to keep it from breaking. "Yes," Harry said. Draco did not move. "Bring me that part and nothing else." Harry nodded. "I will bring you your name." He slid the top sheet into a cloth sleeve. The second sheet showed a pattern that spread across Britain in thin paths and faded at the edges. Names lay like stones in places people never showed on maps. He did not read them. He slid the sheet into the same sleeve. The last sheet was small. It was covered in the short clean strokes in a block that felt like a creed written to hurt the hand that signed it. Bill set 2 fingertips on the table to ground them both. "We take all 3, he said. Harry closed the box and slid it into the bag they had brought for this and nothing else. The air in the room grew warmer, then cooler, then still. The pressure on his shoulder eased. Draco let out a breath. "You did not break anything." "Good." He stepped back into the corridor. "Now you both leave as if you were never here." They retraced their path through the square chamber and the 2 left turns and the corridor. Lamps went out behind them. The small door side shut. The hedge mask pressed and let them pass. The night air tasted of wet leaves again. The manor sat pale and perfect behind its curtain. At the beach stand Draco stopped and faced Harry full. "We have a thing between us now," he said. "It is not friendship." Harry met him without flinching. "It is a ledger." Draco nodded. "You owe me a copy of any place where Malfoy stands in those sheets. And you owe me one truth while you still like the sound of your own creed." Harry waited. "Is this the only way to keep the world from turning into the grave of our parents?" Draco asked. Harry told the truth that a man could live with. "It is the way I can carry tonight." Draco searched his face for a lie and did not find one. He stepped back. "Good night, Potter." Bill set a hand on Harry's shoulder and steered him toward the road. They walked without speaking until the hedges hid the house and the crown of beeches was behind them. Bill spoke first. "You kept your hands steady." Harry nodded. "The room helped." Bill cut him a look. "Do not give rooms the credit when you bled for the skill." Hermione waited in the kitchen with the ledger open and a pot of tea that had gone cold and been heated again. Ron had a chair turned backward and one boot hooked around a rung like a man who had tried to sit and failed. "Well," Ron said, "we found a box inside a room inside a room." Harry said, "We did not die. That is a good start." Hermione shut the ledger so she could look at his face without lines in the way. "Sit. Tell me how you did not die." Harry told it. The gate and the hinge and the hedge mask and the stairs you could not see. The square chamber with the short marks. The room that did not breathe until they grounded it. He told it plain. No flourishes. No bright acts. He told it like a man writing a report for himself. Hermione listened with her whole face. She stopped him twice to ask where he stood and which way the pull went. She stopped him once to ask how long the lamps took to die behind them. She stopped him at the part with the sheets and spoke in a level voice. What did the last one feel like? A creed that hates pride, he said. Her mouth tightened in a way that meant she approved even while she hated to admit it. Bill set the bag on the table. We do not read them here, he said. We do not read them in front of any window. Hermione nodded. Basement workroom. She looked at Harry. You promised me an argument before sleep. He sat back and braced himself and found he did not need to. She was not angry. She was precise. Rule 1. Do not test a ward when a man with blood rights is ready to open it. You did not. Good. Rule 2. Do not chase a sheet when the room starts to feel like a sermon. You did not. Good. Rule 3. Do not promise a copy to a man until you know what is safe to copy. You promised the parts with his family name. We can live with that. She held his gaze. Rule 4. If you feel the room trying to be sweet, you say the word out loud so Bill can hear it. Harry lifted his bandaged hand. I did. Bill backed her up. He did. Ron had been quiet. Now he spoke. Rule 5. When you go somewhere that can eat you, you tie a rope to your belt so I can pull you back when you get ideas. Hermione almost smiled. We will revisit the rope rule when the ministry stops raiding private homes. Ron lifted the newspaper and waved at the page as if it had tried to bite him. Percy and his board of clever people want to make a tour of London attics. Hermione set the paper aside with 2 fingers. We will ward the doors and label every drawer to slow them down. We will also clear a space for Bill to work. Bill opened the case and took out the staff and did not set it on the wood until he had laid a square of plain cloth. We will read 2 pages tonight, he said. Then we sleep. Then we deal with whatever fresh nonsense Kingsley announces in the morning. He glanced at Harry. Your hands. Harry looked down. The knuckles were scraped where the iron ring had bitten him during training, and the skin had split again on the hedge mask stairs without his noticing. He washed them at the sink and let the cold water sting. He dried them on a clean towel. The ache behind his eyes told him where the tithe had left its empty chair. He did not touch that place. Hermione set the first sheet on the cloth and smoothed the air above it with her palm without making contact. We do this clean and slow, she said. No one speaks unless the staff hums. Bill stood at her left and watched the corners as if the paper might take a breath. Harry stood at her right and let the tiny second beat at his wrist match and then drift and then match again. They read. The marks did not become words. They became paths in the mind, rooms that wanted men to stand in them and decide. Old names pressed up through the clear surface like stones that had been laid 40 years ago and never moved. At the bottom corner, the small block that felt like a ledger caught at Harry and pulled. He did not let it. He looked instead for the shape that felt like Malfoy. He found it and kept his promise. He slid a sheet of vellum over that corner and traced what he felt, not what he saw. The tracing quill left a simple grid of short strokes that would make no sense to anyone who had not stood in that room with those men. It would make enough sense to the man who had grown up 3 floors over it. Hermione nodded her approval. That is safe, she said. Bill lifted the second sheet and placed it with care. This one had the sweep of Britain in it, the thin paths like veins, the clean feeling of good decisions made fast, the drag of bad ones that had required more blood later. Harry felt his breath grow shallow and forced it long. Stop, Bill said quiet. Drink. They drank water that had gone warm. Tasted honest. The staff on the cloth stayed quiet. Ron cleared his throat. You said a room under the house had marks on the doors like the locket. Harry looked up. Yes. Ron rubbed his jaw. Do you think it is all the same hand from the start, or do they teach a copybook? Bill answered. A school would have made this easier to police. This is not a school. Hermione closed the second sheet and slid it back into the bag. Enough, she said. We sleep now. Harry did not argue. He stood and pain spoke in his knees and shoulders in a language he understood. He leaned a hip against the table and looked at the bag and saw the work of the next week. The month. The year. Hermione touched his wrist. The skin was warm over the cipher. You kept your promise, she said. He met her eyes. Count the cost and hold the line. She nodded. You hold lines and I count the cost with you. Ron stood and stretched until his back cracked. Tomorrow I get to argue with a man who likes forms. He looked almost happy. Bill gathered the tools and slid them back into the case with the care of a man who placed knives on a shelf in the same order every time. He looked at Harry last. The manor will shift because you breathed in one of its private rooms, he said. Draco will feel it when he walks down to steal his breakfast. He will know our work is real. Harry thought of Draco under the beach stand. Chin up, words sharp, spine held as if pretending could make it true. Good, he said. Upstairs the house kept its stale breath and its old war smells. Their steps on the stairs made the old wood answer with small honest sounds. In the dark Harry lay on a bed that did not feel like a stranger's for once, and let the small second beat at his wrist count him down. In the quiet just before he slept he saw for a blink the square chamber under the manor and the 4 doors with their short marks. He saw the one on the right open to a table and a ledge and a box that did not hum. He saw the other 3 doors stay shut. He wondered which one led to a record that would explain why men like Saul Croker did not look surprised when boys became tools. He wondered which one would hurt to read. He turned his face into the pillow and let the house hum the note it hummed when it was at peace. It was a thin note. It held. In Wiltshire a man woke in a long room and knew without knowing how that a door under his floor had opened when he was not there. He sat up. He felt no rage, only relief. The ledger had moved. The garden had not died. The name Malfoy still meant something other than history. He lay back and stared at his ceiling and said nothing. At Grimmauld Place Hermione wrote a line in the ledger before she blew out the lamp. Serpent's transaction completed. No alarms. One promise made to a man who wants to be a person. She set down the quill and closed her eyes. The room did not hum. It breathed like a room with tired walls and decent people inside it. In the morning there would be forms and raids and a minister who would speak into cameras about safety. There would be doors that did not want to open and lines that pulled sweet and old maps that tried to turn into sermons. For tonight there was simple sleep and the warm weight of a hand on the pillow beside Harry's, as if someone in a different room had reached across the house in the only way she could. The portkey dropped them on a slate landing behind an old customs house that faced a narrow river. Stone bridges. Steep roofs. A bell somewhere that hit the hour and then gave up. The air smelled of damp wood and iron. A small plaque by the door read Museum of Local Curiosities in 3 languages. Their cover said International Cleanup. Their badges said Magical Accident and Catastrophe Consultancy. Their faces said Do not ask for a tour. Ron scanned the alley, calm and sharp. Hermione checked the small field kit on her shoulder. Harry felt the second pulse under his left wrist and steadied his breath. You both right? Ron asked without looking at them. Yes, Hermione said. Ready, Harry answered. Hermione lifted the canvas flap on a side door. The curator met them in a narrow hall that was too clean. He was a small man in a suit 1 size too large, eyes wide, voice careful. He spoke in the local tongue first, saw their faces, then switched to plain English and kept the nerves out of his words by force. You are late by 1 hour, he said. We moved as fast as the paperwork. Hermione said with a diplomatic smile that did not slow her hands. Show us the room and any stare down. He hesitated. This museum has a proud history, so does your foundation stone. Ron said, gentle enough to land. We want to help it keep that pride. The curator swallowed his next sentence and led them down 2 turns and into a low gallery where glass cases stood on iron legs. The cases held brass compasses that had never seen a map and jars with labels that had been written by 5 different hands across 100 years. In the center a black column rose from the floor. It looked like a boundary marker moved indoors for safety. Old runes had been cut deep and then filled with metal that had settled dull. Hermione stopped 2 steps away and breathed out once. It wants to be a key, she said. Ron circled slow, eyes tracing lines, not words. Where did you find this? Old churchyard, the curator said. We brought it in for repairs after vandals. The cases began to whisper, not sound. A faint pull that made the hairs on Harry's arms lift. The black column pushed against the room like a slow tide. Hermione kept her voice low. Everyone out of this building. The curator blinked. We cannot close on a weekday. Ron stepped to the door and held it open. You can if the floor wants to swallow your gift shop. The man looked at the column and something in him understood. He nodded and went to find his staff. The door clicked behind him. Silence returned. Then the subtle scrape of wood on wood as chairs somewhere upstairs moved. Doors shut. A key turned. The bell in the square rang a short pattern to tell people nothing was wrong. Hermione shrugged the field kit off her shoulder and set it on a table. We set a ground before anything else. Harry laid a salt ring at the base of the column with the speed of a man who had practiced until his hands remembered. 8 iron nails. Even points. He set the compass. The needle turned like it wanted to point at the river and then decided the floor was more interesting. It settled south a fraction and pulsed once. Ron took position by the main door. He held his wand low and ready and kept one ear for stairs. Do not be heroic, he said toward Harry. Be dull and careful. Bill would be proud. Harry lifted the line staff from its cloth. The metal was cool. The rings sat quiet, as if listening to the room. He set his feet and let the second pulse at his wrist meet the room tone. Hermione crouched and touched the old runes without actually touching them. Not churchyard work. Older. This was cut when half this valley was forest and the other half was wet rock. She glanced up. Ready, ready, Harry said. Hermione, count. She nodded. First ring a notch. Harry moved it. Cold ran up his arms. The compass needle swung and held. The old metal in the runes shivered with a small sound like thin sheet iron in a gust. Second ring half a notch. He moved less. The pull steadied into a single signal. Sweat broke across his face at once. Third ring a breath only. He nudged. The column answered with a slow suck that tried to drink the room. The compass went wide to the stop and pressed there. Hermione said one word. Hold. Harry held. Footsteps on the stairs. Not the curator. Too quiet. Too even. Ron did not shout. He lifted his wand and kept the doorframe between himself and the steps. The first adherent of the axiom came into view like a shadow that had decided to be a person. Gray robe. Clean boots. A white strip tied around the upper arm. No mask. Plain face. Calm mouth. Museum is closed. Ron said in the local tongue that he had learned from a phrase sheet and a bartender. The man looked down the hall at the gallery and saw the column and the ring and Harry with the staff and Hermione with the kit. 2 more adherents slid in behind him. They all watched the same thing with polite attention. Containment unit. The first one said in decent English, we can assist. We are here to prevent spillage. Ron did not smile. Appreciate the offer. You can assist by leaving. The man looked at his sleeve and then back at Ron. We prefer austerity. Harry heard Hermione whisper without moving her lips. Erosion cult. Confirmed. Ron said under his breath. Harry, we will keep your back. The adherent raised his wand and fired a thin blue thread that did not sizzle or flash. It simply cut air. Ron dropped, slid, and sent a tight chain of stunners that forced the second and third men to stagger. They did not fall. They split left and right with neat timing. Hermione flicked her wrist. A grid sprang across the gallery entrance. A quiet lattice that hummed at a pitch only the columns seemed to care about. She did not look away from the runes. Harry, do not break our ground. Harry kept the ring steady under his hands. The column pulled harder. The staff vibrated to match it. He felt the sweet edge. He named it. Sweet. Hermione reached up and put 2 fingers on his elbow. Human warmth. Not much. Enough. Ron blocked a second thread, returned a blunt force hex that knocked the lead adherent into a case of fake compasses. Glass cracked. The compasses rolled like coins. The man pushed himself up with a tired sigh. You think us weak, he said. We have learned to cut your spells without waste. Try this. He lifted his wand and made a small gesture like pushing a door closed with 2 fingers. The hum in the room stuttered. Harry felt his wand arm go light. Hermione frowned. Wand dampeners, she said. Crude. He is cutting the harmonics, not the core. Ron answered without missing the next block. I hate polite villains. Hermione scolded him on principle even as she sent a rope that looked like smoke and bit the third man around the knees. None of that. Focus. The leader drew a knife that was too clean to be a knife used on a person. He flipped it once and let it ring against his palm. He came forward through the lattice with the deliberate step of a man who believed the room owed him. Ron met him at the threshold. 2 spells snapped white against the knife and died. Ron did not swear. He shifted angle, feinted high, and drove a silent stunner into the man's hip. The knife clanged against the stone. The man hissed air like a kettle and fell back a step. The second adherent tried to go low for the staff. Hermione refolded the lattice, turned it, and locked it vertical like a screen that stopped people and let sound pass. Harry, she said, you are at 3 and a breath. I want 4 for 2 counts to drain the first ring inside the rock. Harry took the 4th ring a notch. Pain went through his palms, up his teeth and into his ears. He set his feet harder. The column stopped pulling like an open mouth and began to drink like a pump. The compass needle hit its stop and then shivered at a rate that matched his heart. Ron threw the knife back down the hall with a banish and met the leader with a push charm that would have broken a normal man's ribs. The man staggered and came on again, voice calm. Magic is excess, he said. You are addicts. Ron snorted. I get cranky when I skip breakfast. Hermione critiqued later. Hermione spared a breath for a dry laugh. Stay out of the box and I will write you a good one. The third adherent pulled a small metal stick from his sleeve and cracked it against the wall. The air went thin. The compass needle trembled. Harry felt the pull change shape. Tool, he said. Hermione did not look. Local damper, she said. Homemade, keep holding. Harry breathed through pain and kept the rings where they were. The column groaned inside the stone. Old iron in the runes began to sing a high note. The staff warmed in his hands. The sweet edge tried again. He said the word. Hermione pressed his elbow harder. Ron knocked the second man into the doorway with a short jab of force, then cut the damper's line with a tight severing charm he had learned from Bill in a kitchen with a tea towel over the window. The air thickened again. The lattice glowed a dull color and held. The leader looked over Ron's shoulder at Harry, at the staff, at Hermione, at the ring on the floor. You are not like your newspapers, he said to Harry, as if they were discussing a school exam. You will destroy your own room to save a house. Harry did not answer. He did not have spare breath. He moved the 4th ring back a hair to push the pull into the salt and away from the floor and felt his stomach turn. A thin whistle cut the air. Not from the column. From the far stair. The leader smiled without his eyes. That is our time, he said. Containment is a pretty word for delay. He stepped back with neat control. The second and third men fell back with him. Ron sent a binding net that kissed the floor where the second man's boot had been a half-second earlier. The leader flicked his wand once. The lattice shivered. Hermione swore under her breath and fed it more power. The men were gone. Not a crack. Not a pop. Just absence. Ron stood braced in the doorway and breathed hard. They never run when it would make me feel clever. Hermione kept her eyes on the runes. Good, she said. I prefer that they respect us. Harry, count now. He did. 4 to 3. 3 to 2 and a breath. 2 to 1. He set the first ring back and the column eased. The old iron stopped singing. The compass needle drifted to a place that was almost center and sat there like a tired animal. Hermione checked the salt. 2 gaps where the floor had sucked at it too hard. She patched them. She set her hand near the runes without touching and closed her eyes. It is not healed, she said. It is stable. Ron took the hall again and listened. No footsteps. No trouble for the next minute. He came back and only then let his hand tremble once before he folded his fingers into a fist to steady it. Harry leaned the staff on the cloth and pressed his back to a case. He swallowed against a dry throat. I need water, he said. Hermione handed him a flask and watched him drink. One true thing, she said. The tool they used on the wall was junk. We held without Bill. Ron grinned. We will tell him anyway so he can look proud and annoyed. Hermione pulled her hair back off her face. Practical and quick. Second true thing, Ron asked. We did not lose the room. Hermione nodded. Now the price. Harry set the empty flask down. Hands shaking, he said. The staff took a bite. Hermione noted it with a short nod and looked at the runes again. And a second price. We will have to argue with a town council that wants to move this pillar to a festival square and wrap it in bunting. Ron groaned. Can we just spell bunting harmless? We can ward the base and write the museum a quiet grant through the front. Hermione said, we will do it later. First we check the lower rooms. She looked at the far door with a sign that said staff only in 3 languages. The curator had not taken that door when he cleared the building. That meant he had forgotten it existed or wanted to forget. Ron checked the frame for trip threads, found none, opened it with his shoulder and a steady push. Steps down. Cold air. Old water. They descended. The basement space had brick arches and old drains that smelled of wet stone. A second marker stood in a shallow pit. Smaller. Cruder. Half the runes were scratched out by tools and hands. The rest glowed faintly in a way only a trained eye would catch. Hermione breathed in, slow and controlled, and then let it out. There it is. Harry set a smaller ring. For nails this time. Tighter circle. The compass needle ticked and held. Ron crouched by the pit and looked at the scratch sections. Someone tried to mute it, he said, or turn it to a personal well. Hermione traced a pattern in the air, then altered it again. The pattern of the scratches is not random, she said. Look, she sketched a set of short lines in the air. Even spacing. 2 longer, then 3 shorter, then 1 longer. She drew a second row. Harry frowned. I have seen that family before. Hermione nodded once. Ethereum relay counts. Ron straightened. You are saying this pattern is ours. I am saying the person who taught them to cut a column knew our counting. Hermione kept her voice flat. They did not copy it from a book. They knew the hand that made the first maps. Harry looked at the runes until the shapes made sense rather than glory or doom. The scratches sat in blocks like a grid that would take a cipher and ask for a key. Hermione drew a second set smaller inside the first, then rotated it. There is error correction here, she said. Not perfect. Close. She looked at Harry. Only an architect or a keeper would know this trick. Ron's jaw went hard. Internal, he said. A traitor or a very old leak. Hermione shook her head. Not a leak. This is new. The damping times are matched to the current sweep laws. Old leaks do not keep up with forms. Ron gave a short, humorless laugh. Percy will be delighted to learn he is part of a cosmic plot. Harry felt the tired anger move in his chest. Not hot. Cold. Useful. We get proof, he said. We do not accuse on a feeling. We never accuse on a feeling, Hermione said. She set to work with clean motions. She took rubbings of the scratched segments without touching the active parts. She sketched the grid as numbers that only meant anything if you had the first page of the Ethereum copybook and the scar on your wrist to go with it. She ran a sequence with her wand that did not light, only clicked when a count matched. Ron kept watch. He listened to water in the drains and to the city above. A bicycle passed on the street and a child laughed. He relaxed a notch. Harry grounded the smaller marker by hand. No staff. No draw. He settled salt and iron and old field steps Bill had crammed into him in a spare hour before supper. The pull eased. The room exhaled. Hermione stood and stretched her back. We have enough, she said. We seal this for now and let the front face handle the public. Ron glanced up toward the gallery. The curator will want to put a rope around the upstairs rock and call it Roman. He can, Hermione said, if we carve him a speech that keeps hands off the base. Harry packed the kit. The small tremor in his fingers had become a fine thread rather than a shake. He could live with that for now. They climbed back to the gallery. The columns stood quiet inside the ring. The cases looked offended by the earlier fight and ready to forgive if someone dusted them. The curator hovered in the hall with a set of keys and a fixed smile that only cracked when he saw the salt. He looked ill and old in one blink and then wore the museum face again. All is well, he asked. All is stable, Hermione corrected with a small kindness. We need to keep the base fenced and off limits. We will arrange it, Ron added in the local tongue. The council will receive a grant for repairs of old stone and woodwork if they follow instructions. The curator looked at the column and then at the 3 of them. He nodded. He believed them now because the room let him. They signed nothing. They promised nothing out loud. They left the curator with a list of practical tasks and a new habit of counting footsteps before he opened the gallery in the morning. They stepped into the damp air behind the customs house. The river slid past without any interest. Ron leaned against the wall and let his head thump back once. Holiday in Europe, he said. Could have fooled me. Hermione almost smiled. We will bring you a pastry if we survive long enough to find a baker who still sells them. Harry watched the river and let the cold work the ache out of his hands. We did not catch the leader, he said. No, Hermione answered. He left a better gift. She lifted the rubbings of the scratched pattern. This is the first clean confirmation that someone inside our house taught them how to build a lattice that our staff will respect. Ron looked at the rubbings and then at her. Plain words, he said. Hermione nodded. Their erosion here was writing a scaffold that matches our cipher cadence. They are not breaking us from the outside. They are using our skeleton and cutting pieces out while the body is walking. Ron made a face. That image will not leave my head. Good, Hermione said. We need it. Harry took the rubbings and felt the shapes under the paper the way he had learned to feel the sheets from the manor. The pattern had a rightness to it that made him angry. There were places where the scratcher had hesitated and then found the exact count by muscle memory. We can prove this, he said. Hermione nodded once. I will match the cadence to access logs and training phrasing and see who still speaks with this rhythm. Ron whistled a short line. You can hear rhythm in reports. Yes, Hermione said. People do not know when they carry a count into their speech. She tucked the papers away. We contact Bill. We send the rubbings by our line and not a public port. We tell Draco nothing until we know if his family is in this century of blame. Ron pushed off the wall and rolled his shoulders. What do we tell the minister? The truth that helps, Hermione said. Ron grimaced. He will ask for all of it. He can ask, Harry said. We give him none of the parts that put us in a grave. He looked at the river a last time and then at the small museum door. Hermione, say our creed. She did. Count the cost and hold the line. They touched wrists in a small habit that felt like old school. Like a vow spoken in a corridor without teachers. Then they walked to the portkey mark, set hands to the blue ring, and let the tug take them. Grimmauld Place received them like a house that had accepted it would never be normal again. Bill was waiting at the table with the staff on cloth and a cup of tea in front of each empty chair. He watched them walk in and counted the way their shoulders moved and the way they did not limp. He nodded. You kept the ground, he said. We did, Hermione answered. She slid the rubbings across. Look at the counts. Bill read with his fingers, not eyes. He did not draw breath sharply when he reached the second row. He let it out slow. That is ours, he said. He lifted his eyes to Harry. You are thinking Lysander. Harry did not pretend otherwise. Name stays in the room for now, he said. Bill tapped the corner of the paper. This cadence was taught in a specific decade, not mine, not Croker's early years. It matches the period when the old wards were refitted after the Grindelwald cleanups. Hermione closed her eyes for one beat while her mind pulled files onto neat shelves. Then the pool is small, she said. Architects and keepers who train then or train with that language still. Ron put a finger on the paper. Anything else inside the museum? 2 markers, Harry said. One upstairs calm now. One downstairs scraped with this. Ron grimaced. We left the curator with instructions and the promise of money. He will buy a rope and a sign. Bill mustered a very small grin. Nothing calms a council like rope and a sign. Hermione slid her notes into the ledger. One true thing, she said. The Axiom unit on site used wand dampeners that cut harmonics, not cores. Bill nodded. That is happening in other places. He rubbed his jaw. I will write a note for Kingsley's tame boys that gives them a fix without making them think. Ron smirked. Write very small words. Bill ignored him. Price. Hermione glanced at Harry's hands. He held them still by choosing to. He paid in a shake and a bad taste that will fade, she said. He did not lie to the staff when it got sweet. Harry drank the tea. Tasted like tin and then like strong leaves. It woke his tongue and let his chest settle back into a human rhythm. Hermione spread a blank page and began to build the analysis in slow lines. The erosion we saw rides a lattice keyed to our copybook count. The field cadence matches the error correction pattern we teach for outer wards. The tool on the wall was home-made and unimportant. The quiet knife that cut spells is new but clumsy. The leader spoke like a man who had been taught to argue rather than rant. She paused and looked up. That last bit matters. Ron lifted a brow. How? He was trying to recruit while fighting Ron. Harry said. He wanted me to see myself in his logic. He wanted me to believe that victory is a cleaner world where nothing surprises and no child wakes a kettle by accident. Hermione tapped the page. Then he will speak again. Good. We will trap his voice and match it to a room we know. Bill looked toward the ceiling as if he could see the city through wood and lift and old chimneys. You want to go back out tonight? He asked. Ron shook his head. We patch and rest. We did not lose the room. We did not lose each other. We take the win and do not chase men down alleys when our hands shake. Hermione considered, then nodded. Agreed. She drew 3 small boxes on the page. Tasks. 1. Bill drafts the harmonic counter for the Ministry sweep cruise. 2. I run cadence matches against archive reports from the refit decade. 3. Harry sleeps 6 hours and does not argue. Harry opened his mouth to argue and then closed it. Yes, he said. Bill pushed the staff across just enough that the metal kissed Harry's wrist. Feel that. The staff hummed once, faint as a cat in a sun patch. Not sweet. Not pulling. A polite notice that the tool remembered him. It is learning you, Bill said. If you put your hands on it when you are too tired, it will take advantage. Harry managed a smile, like a Weasley chessboard. Ron grinned. I accept this comparison. We are a very clever set. Hermione capped her ink and shut the ledger. One more thing before sleep, she said. Draco. Harry considered the beach stand, the small door, the sheets that had felt like old decisions. He gets the copy of his name, he said. He does not get a whisper about cadence or traitors until we know the spine from the smoke. Hermione nodded. I will send a note that says his house appears in an old ledger of doors, and that a copy will be made for him after review. No tone, no promise. Harry stood. The room tilted once and then leveled. Ron caught his sleeve and let go. We are good, he said. Slow smile. Harry gave it back. We are good. He walked to the stairs. His legs felt like wood for the first 5 steps and then like legs again. He reached the landing and heard Bill and Hermione fall into quiet work voices. He heard Ron mutter about writing to George for a bulk order of rope. He heard the house breathe in and out. The second pulse under his wrist settled into a patient count. On the bed, he saw the museum column when he shut his eyes. He saw the scratched pattern and the careful hand that had taught it. He saw a man in a gray robe say you will destroy your own room to save a house, and he tasted the metal of the truth inside the insult. He slept anyway. In the morning the bell in the square rang the hour, and an intern at the museum unlocked the front door and found a polite note on the desk in neat hand. It instructed the staff on how to speak about rope and signs and old stones, and included a number that would ring a desk where a man with a calm voice would answer and send a grant without making a fuss. In the same hour, far away, a keeper read a report about a small disturbance in a small town and drew a line in the margin that only he would understand. He folded the report in half, then thirds, then slid it into a box with a dozen others. He locked the box. He listened to the house. It did not hum. He stood very still and told himself he was not tired. Back at Grimmauld Place, Hermione closed her book at last and rubbed her eyes. The cadence match will take a day if I do it by hand, she said quietly to the empty kitchen. It will take an hour if I ask for a machine. She did not ask for a machine. She sharpened a pencil and began to count. The kitchen was quiet enough to hear ink scratch. Hermione sat with 3 stacks of parchment, the Codex copybook on her left, the rubbings from the museum in the middle, and a pile of old Ethereum access summaries on the right. She had drawn a narrow grid on a fresh sheet and filled it with short strokes that marked cadence, not words. Her pencil made a dry sound each time she set a mark. Harry stood at the stove and watched water come to a boil as if it might forget. Ron leaned his hips against the table with his arms crossed and counted the scrape of pencil lines without meaning to. Bill had left before dawn to take a burden to a ministry lab that did not exist on any floor plan. Hermione did not look up. Row 9 matches row 4 in the refit decade, she said. Row 9 also matches the museum scratch. Ron frowned. Plain words. Hermione tapped the grid. This rhythm of cuts only shows up in training notes from a small window of years. The count inside the count. She slid a page free with the edge of her hand and set it by itself. Croker did not write like this. Bill did not. I did not. She pulled another page from the stack and placed it beside the first. Lysander did. Harry turned off the flame and brought mugs to the table. He set one by her hand. She did not drink yet. She read. He said, position in the house, architect, keeper in his previous term, trainer of outer ward crews for 2 summers. He signed the refit ledger in the year the old atrium wards were replaced. Hermione lifted her eyes to him for the first time that morning. He also wrote essays about balance that were assigned to initiates 15 years ago. Harry sat. He taught that balance is movement, not a point. Yes, Hermione said. He also taught that movement without limit becomes collapse. She turned a second sheet. Same clean strokes. A margin note in a calm hand. And he kept notes in cadence. Ron scratched his jaw. So he knows the trick we saw in the basement. He knows it by heart. Hermione said. Only 2 keepers wrote with this cadence and still breathe air we can share. She slid a second name into view. A woman in her 80s who had retired to a mountain and answered letters in ink so faint you could see the paper through it. Not her, Hermione said. Her cadence softened when she left the city. Lysander's got sharper. Harry watched the way Hermione's mouth set when she reached a conclusion she did not enjoy. We do not chase him on a hunch, he said. We need a signature that a court would accept if we ever had a court that could accept this. Hermione nodded. We get it from the archives he thought we forgot to record. Ron raised both brows. You forgot to record things. Hermione almost smiled. I wrote 2 copies and told him I had written one. She looked at Harry again. We will have to go below and ask the Codex for permission. Harry felt the small second pulse in his wrist change to match the way she said below. Alcor first, he said. He will want us to ask the stars if the room will listen. Hermione closed the grid. Stars will tell us where Strain sits. The Codex will tell us whose hand bent to make it. Bring both. They went down the long stair that smelled like stone and polish. The map room opened before Harry's hand reached it. The ceiling sky had shifted again. Points crossed and held. The hum was lower, like a string plucked with a thick glove. Alcor stood by the table with his head lifted, eyes dark and clear. You are early, he said. Good. He pointed at 3 faint points grouped like a triangle fallen on its side. These hold only because someone with will is pressing them with both hands. He looked between them. You want a name for those hands, Hermione answered. We want a trace. We want the instrument, not the idea. Alcor nodded. The star map will not give you a signature worth a court, he said, but it will tell you if you should waste your breath on another man. He tapped the table. The tone climbed. 2 lines between points brightened. The man you are thinking of is in the room you do not want him to be in, he said. He is near the curtain the ministry pretends is a piece of art. The veil, Harry said. Alcor met his eyes. Do not walk through anything until you have had supper. Bring a ground. Hermione kept her voice level. We also need the Codex. We need keys from deep shelves. Alcor inclined his head. Go, he said. Be kind to the book, and the book will tell you who pressed your lattice into the museum stones. He looked at Harry a last time. You will pay soon, he said. The tone in the room dropped again to a patient hum. They crossed to the archive doors. Grimbold was already there with a lamp, the same plain face and the same workman hands. He nodded at them as if he had expected this exact minute. You want the old admission logs and the teacher's mark pages, he said. Yes, Hermione answered. He lifted the bar. The archive air breathed out at them, dry and a little sweet with old paper. They moved between the tall shelves. Harry could feel the Codex in the back of the room like a lake behind a line of trees. Not calling. Existing. Grimbold led them between cases, took a right and then a left, and stopped at a locked drawer built into a table older than Bill. He held up a plain key. Keys do not make me feel important, he said. They make me feel like I will not have to remake the world from memory if I have a bad day. He turned the key. Inside were narrow booklets with thread spines. Each was numbered by hand. He set 3 on the table and flipped them open with a careful thumb. Here is your refit decade, he said. He pointed at the neat short strokes in the margins. Your man had a habit of counting out loud on paper. Hermione leaned in. Her lip pressed thin when she reached the 3rd booklet. A line of strokes matched her grid by the half-breath. There, she said. Grimbold nodded once. You want the Codex to sign this? Yes, Harry said. Grimbold shut the drawer and turned to the back. The Codex sat under a band of simple iron that kept men honest. No glow. No show. A big book that looked like it had watched families die of old age more than once. Grimbold set his palm on the band. We ask, he said. Do not take. He did not close his eyes. He breathed once and then again and then looked at the book and spoke like a man telling a friend what he needed. We have a lattice used in a city without permission. We have a cadence taught by our own. We want the hand that taught it so we can stop a bleed. The band warmed under his palm and then cooled. He lifted it off the covers and set it aside. The book opened to a page that had waited. Columns in clean script. Names and dates. Not ministry dates. Old marks that meant more. The left edge held little stride marks that were not letters and not numbers. Cadence again. The breath of the teacher written into the ledger. Hermione matched the stride marks with her copy grid. Her pencil slowed. She did not look at the name until her hand had finished. Then she looked. Lysander, she said. Grimbold watched both of their faces. You needed a hand as much as a name, he said. You have both. He closed the book gently. He set the iron over it again. You do not arrest men with this, he said. You use it to stop the work they should not have done. Harry nodded. We stopped the work. Grimbold put the 3 booklets into a cloth bag. You take these on a cart and not by a door that opens into a crowd, he said. He glanced toward the map room. The sky has been dull all morning. That means the big threads are being held for a show. Be careful with your pride. Hermione gave him a look that said thank you better than the words would have. He grunted once and went back to his shelves. They rode the narrow service cart into the city. No lantern. No show. The clatter of wheels on hard rail. The air from the tunnels moved past them like a steady hand keeping the heat even. They did not speak much. When the cart slid into the small platform behind a shuttered workshop, Hermione set the cloth bag under her cloak and led the way up into a short lane with unimportant shops and a post box. Safe house, she said. Then we read and cross-check and lock this down. Harry followed her through 2 turns and a narrow cut between walls into a mews that looked abandoned. She tapped a brick at knee height, then one at shoulder height, then set her palm flat. The door appeared like a guilty thought, then decided to be a door. Inside the safe house smelled of tea and old books and laundry dried in warm air. There were 2 rooms. A table. A small bed with a clean quilt. Kettle. A window with a blind. Ron took the front chair with a view of the lane through a pinhole charm. Hermione laid the bag on the table and set the 3 booklets beside a copy sheet, then pulled out the rubbings and the museum count. She worked with quiet hands. Harry made tea and set a mug next to the booklets, one next to Ron, one next to her. She did not drink at first. She drew the cadence, turned it, overlapped it with the margin stride marks, and set her pencil down. It is a match, she said. Not close, exact. She turned to Harry. We have our signature. We have to decide what to do with it fast. Harry sat opposite her. We go to Kingsley with enough to stop the sweeps that will trip the veil. We do not give him a sheet that teaches him how to cut a city open. Hermione nodded. We also prepare a signal for internal use only that locks a copybook out of the lattice when we hear this count. Ron sipped tea and watched the lane. You 2 get to write a memo that saves lives and does not teach a minister how to play with doors. I get to tell 5 Auror squads how to walk under a ceiling without shaking hands. He glanced over at Harry. I like my job today. Hermione touched the edge of the booklet with her fingertips and then finally looked at the bed as if it had just remembered to be a bed. She rubbed her brow with 2 fingers. You need sleep, Harry said. You have been awake since before the map room. Hermione shook her head. We sleep when we put this in 3 places that will keep running if one breaks. Her voice softened. After that we sleep for an hour. He held her gaze. After that we sleep for an hour. She nodded and let the corner of her mouth move. Deal. They worked. Hermione wrote a short directive that used small words and avoided the cadence trick altogether. Ron translated the field part into a list a tired Auror could follow in the rain. Harry drafted the internal lock, the one that would hear Lysander's count and refuse to let a door use it. He wrote it like a wand movement, then like a staff sequence, then like a sentence a senior would say to a room. He read it twice out loud and felt the cipher in his wrist agree in a small pulse. Hermione read his line, changed 3 words, and underlined one. Now it will hold for people who do not talk like you, she said. Ron looked up from the pinhole charm. 2 men just passed the lane twice without convincing their feet they were lost. Hermione folded the directive and slid it into a flat case. We are done here, she said. We distribute and then we sleep. She paused as the kettle clicked empty. We are honest. She looked at Harry. We are not going to sleep until we say the thing we have both been refusing because it will make the work harder if it goes wrong. Harry felt his hands go still on the edge of the table. Ron stood at once. I will take a walk and find a pastry that a very nice old woman will tell me is from this morning. He slipped out through the side door without waiting for objections. The house breathed in, then out. Hermione set both palms flat on the table and looked at him without flinching. I am not your conscience. I am not your handler. I am not your minister. I am your partner, and I am done pretending that word is only about work. Harry kept his voice steady. I know. Hermione blinked once. Then say it back so I can stop holding my breath. He stood and came around the table and stood close enough to count the small lines at the corner of her eyes that the war had put there too early. You are my partner, he said, in work, in rooms that do not care about us, in rooms that do. Her mouth trembled once and then steadied. We do this with open eyes. We do not use each other to feel better about bad choices. We do not promise safety we cannot deliver. He nodded. We hold each other to the ledger we pretend is only for magic. She let out a breath that shook one time and then stopped shaking. I am going to kiss you now, she said. You can say no and I will not take offense, and we will go back to being stubborn in the same room for the next 40 years. He swallowed because his throat had gone tight. Do it, she stepped in. It was not a long kiss. It did not try to make a story of itself. It was the simple press of one truth against another. Warm, present, not an oath, a fact. When they separated, she rested her forehead against his for a count. We still go to work, she said. We still argue after. Good, he said, because I have many things to argue with you about, and I want to do it while we are both still here. Her laugh was soft and real. Ron knocked once and came in backwards with a paper bag. The very nice old woman lied to me with kindness, he said. These are yesterday. We are going to pretend they are today. He saw their faces and did not grin or make a sound. He set the bag down and poured tea again and handed Harry a mug as if tea could carry people across a narrow bridge. The cipher in Harry's wrist jumped once hard enough to make him flinch. Hermione felt it through his sleeve. Message, she said. He called the small pane. White letters formed with no flourish. The address code was internal. Keeper channel. The words were few. Stop. We need order. Join me at the curtain and end drift. Elle. Hermione read it as quietly as if the letters could hear. He is inviting you to end the war by killing the garden. Ron shoved the pastries back into the bag. We go now. Harry nodded. We go by the under hall. We bring ground. We do not fight his speech with a speech. Hermione gathered the case, the directive, the booklets in their bag. We also bring the lock, she said. If he tries to run a lattice through our bones, we make the room say no. They moved. The cart took them within 3 corridors of the Department of Mystery Service entrance. They stepped into cold air that smelled of polish and wizard fire that had been kept too low for too long. The under hall was stone and shadow. Bill waited at the last turn with the case and a face that had decided not to argue. Kingsley made a noise when I said no to his sweep timing, he said. He is going to make a different noise when the ceiling stops humming and the veil starts to breathe. He lifted the case lid. The staff lay on the cloth. The compass sat ready. A second smaller compass sat next to it, its needle already tugging toward the hall ahead. Ground first, Bill said. Always. They set a tight ring in the service corridor itself, not in the room, so the pull would have to pass through salt and iron to get to them. Hermione slipped the lock sheet inside her sleeve. Ron took the left with wand low. Bill took the right with the case strap across his shoulder. Harry stood in the center and let the staff rest across his palms. Ready? Bill asked. Ready, Harry said. They moved into the department. The air changed. It was thicker and thinner at once. The sound of breath inside a bag. The corridor opened into the round room with doors that liked to spin and make people feel dim. They did not spin today. They sat like coins that had been told to behave. Beyond, the archchamber waited. The veil hung like a patient curtain in a draftless room. It did not move. It did not whisper. For one long count, the place felt like a museum set for a photograph. Then the veil shivered. Not a flap. Not a billow. A tight ripple as if someone had plucked it with 2 fingers from the other side. Bill spoke without lifting his eyes from the floor. You feel that? Yes, Harry said. Hermione answered in the same breath. We placed the outer ground at the west column. Ron moved first, fast and quiet. Salt, nails, compass. He worked like a man who had taught himself to do delicate tasks with big hands. Hermione took the east. Bill slid to the south. 3 rings. 3 needles. All 3 pointed to the arch and then shook. The pull found them, cold through the teeth and ears. Harry did not touch the staff yet. He looked at the arch and the veil and the stone around it and thought about every step Bill had made him take for a week until his hands knew where the floor was weak without looking. He set the staff across his palms. First ring a notch. He said it to himself and moved. Cold ran up his arms. The nearest compass swung and hit its stop. The veil shivered again and did not stop shivering. A thin line of air moved toward it from everywhere at once. Hermione spoke low and even. Second ring half a notch. Push into the grounds we set. He moved the second ring and let the staff pull a drink from the west ring. Then the east, then the south, then eased it back so the drain did not become a tear. A man stepped out of the shadow near the archtall without being loud. Hair the color of paper left in the sun. Robes that did not bother with pretty. His face looked like it had held a tired expression for so long that the skin had learned it. Lysander, Hermione said. He inclined his head once. We are running out of years to pretend, he said. His voice was not angry. It was not cold. It was the voice of a teacher at the end of a term that had gone on for a decade. Harry kept his hands steady. You taught me a lesson I did not ask for, he said. You taught me that men can press a city into a shape and call it safety. Lysander studied his face as if he were checking a sum. I taught children that balance is a moving line that needs a hand, he said. Then I watched men who like surprises kick the line until it broke. Hermione answered. You watched Dark Lords and ministers do stupid things and decided that free will was the problem. Lysander looked at her with the same calm. I decided that a discipline without an end becomes a circle that grinds people into stone. He lifted his hand. He was not holding a wand. He held a narrow rod of old metal. Not a staff. Not a toy. A relay baton for a race no one should run. He pressed its tip against the flagstone. The veil rippled in a steady pattern. The compasses trembled. Harry tasted iron in his mouth. Ron kept to the flank, eyes on the side door in case someone younger and more foolish came in with a badge and a speech. Hermione slid her sleeve back a finger width and touched the lock sheet with her wrist. Lysander watched her and did not try to stop her. You will not lock me out with a paper, he said. I wrote the copybook you are about to flip around. Hermione did not smile. You wrote that one, she said. I wrote this one. She pressed her wrist to her palm and spoke the lock in the tone they had agreed would make a room listen. The air in the chamber changed at once. The relay baton in Lysander's hand stopped humming. The veil shiver slowed a hair. The nearest compass needle eased off the stop and found a breath of center. Lysander did not look surprised. He looked relieved. Good, he said. That means you still understand that rooms can be taught to say no. He stepped closer to the arch. 2 more steps would put him within the arc of the old stone. Do not, Bill said, voice calm, not loud. You are not a boy meant for showing off. Lysander smiled a small honest smile at Bill. I missed your insults, he said. He looked back at Harry. You can end this today, he said. You can drain this place and the lines under it and let the rest of the map stop shaking. It will be a black patch on the board. It will be an ugly one. It will give the world a decade without a child burning down a kitchen by crying. Harry's hands tightened on the staff until the rings bit his skin. And then what, he said. Then we pick another patch and another. Lysander did not blink. Then you teach a generation that a weak flame is safer than a strong one. They will be bored. They will not die confused and bleeding under a sky that does not care. Hermione spoke very quietly. You are tired. Lysander turned his head as if she had told him his name. Yes, he said. She nodded. Then tell the truth with the whole of it. You are not doing this for children. You are doing it to make the room stop asking you to care. He did not flinch. He did not argue. He did a smaller thing. He looked at the veil and his face softened in a way that would have broken a different room. I want to stop hearing this curtain breathe, he said. Silence held for a beat that felt like a long hallway. The veil shivered again. Harder. The air near the floor pressed inward. The west ground groaned. The iron nails clicked in their ring. Bill spoke in the same calm he used when a curse was trying to decide which way to turn. First ring hold. Second ring back a hair. Harry obeyed. The draw eased into the grounds instead of the floor. He tasted salt and tin and something like old smoke. Lysander lifted the baton and let it hang at his side. "Join me," he said to Harry without heat. "We can write the black patches with care. We can count the cost and stop pretending it is not paid." Harry answered without raising his voice. "I will write the cost. I will not make the world smaller to make the ledger look neat," Ron said from the flank. "Also, you are about to be interrupted by a very loud minister if you keep shaking his basement." A low bell sounded in the corridor. Not the public bell. The internal one that meant senior people were running in polished shoes and did not want to be seen doing it. Lysander exhaled, as if he were relieved to have the decision taken out of his hands. He stepped back from the arch and touched the baton to the floor once, not to increase the pull, only to leave a signature on the stone that a trained reader would understand. The veil shuddered in a last strong roll and then settled into a small, constant tremor. He looked at Harry one last time. "You chose drift," he said. "I chose ashore." He glanced at Hermione. "Lock your doors well." He looked at Bill. "Do not let boys die trying to impress you." Then he turned and walked into a side corridor that had not been there until he had decided to use it. The corridor closed behind him like a polite throat clearing. No pop. No flash. Absence again. The internal bell grew louder. Voices. The round room doors thought better of staying still and began to spin. Bill did not raise his voice. "Break grounds 1 and 2 and keep 3 until the veil stops trying to take the hairs off our arms." Harry eased the rings back. West, east, south kept. The pull eased to a steady annoyance. The veil tremor held at a small tight shake that even the most stubborn unspeakable would have to admit was not usual. Kingsley came in with 2 wands and 3 aids and the weight of a speech trying to right itself behind his teeth. He took one look at the rings and the staff and the compass needles and shut his mouth before the speech could fall out and embarrass them all. Bill said the first words. "We contained a pulse," he said. "Your sweeps will trigger more if you do not change the order of operations." Kingsley looked at Hermione. "Is that in my inbox?" "It will be in 2 minutes," she said. Kingsley looked at Ron. "Are my squads going to do the stupid thing first if I tell them not to?" Ron scratched his jaw. "Some of them, if you send them with rope and a clear list, fewer." Kingsley nodded once and then looked at Harry. "You look like a person who is not sleeping well." Harry kept his face still. "We will sleep when this room stops pretending to be fine." Kingsley glanced at the veil and did not hide the way the hair at his neck rose. "I hate that curtain," he said. He turned on his heel. "Do the thing that stops my city from breaking." He left the aides in place to look official and absorb questions from people who needed to ask them. He went away to be a minister who would sign a paper he did not understand and carry it like a shield anyway. Hermione pressed the lock again with a quiet voice. The relay pattern in the stone under the arch dimmed. The veil tremor came down another finger width. Bill shut the case. "We are done here for now," he said. "We do not chase a tired man into a corridor that pretends to be a door." Ron nodded. "We go home and count." They walked back into the underhall the way they had come, slow and aware of the way their own feet sounded. In the service corridor, Hermione broke the last ground with a neat sweep. Salt scraped on stone. The sound reminded Harry of the museum and the old column and a small man in a suit who had tried to keep his voice steady. Back at the safe house, Hermione set the 3 booklets on the table as if they were sleeping animals. She took the directive and sent it down the line that would spit it into 5 inboxes at once. She slid the internal lock into the Ethereum channel with the tag that made it private to people who would not weaponize it. Then she sat down with her hands pressed to her eyes for a count of 10. Ron sank into the chair by the window. "One true thing," he said. Hermione lowered her hands. "We caught the pulse and kept the floor," she said. Harry added another. "We confirmed the signature and it did not lie to us." Bill, who had joined them and leaned in the doorway now with a face set back to calm, added a third. "You did not lie to yourselves when it got sweet." He looked at Harry. "Price." Harry flexed his fingers. "Hands ache, headaches. Staff is learning me faster than I am learning it." Hermione gave her own. "We have to fight a man who is not wrong about human mess and is still wrong about the answer." Ron rubbed his face hard. Also, the pastry was old. Bill huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. "I will make toast and call it a feast." He moved to the stove with the ease of a man who had cooked in tents and caves and a single king's kitchen when someone had not been paying attention. Harry looked at Hermione. She met his eyes. The safe house felt small and good and honest for 1 minute. He reached for her hand. She took it. No oath. A fact. The pane blinked once more. White letters. Not from Lysander. From Alcor. The map shows a tear trying to remember how to be a tear. He wrote, "Sleep 2 hours. Then come see the sky lie to you politely." Hermione read it and nodded. "We sleep 2 hours," she said. Harry started to argue and stopped. "Yes," he said. They ate toast that Bill called a feast. They lay down in the small room with the clean quilt. They did not pretend there was no danger. They did not pretend the kiss had solved anything. They slept because the room had allowed it and because you cannot hold a line with hands that shake for lack of rest. In the Department of Mysteries, the veil trembled at a constant small rate. A junior research clerk walked past the arch and told himself he had not felt the hair on his arms rise. He wrote himself a note to check the readings after lunch and then lost the note inside a folder that did not want to be useful. In a different room, Lysander sat at a table with no windows and wrote 6 lines on a sheet with the short strokes of a man who counted when he thought. He folded the paper and set it under a clean stone. He put the relay baton in a drawer and locked it. He closed his eyes and listened to a building breathe. He did not look relieved. He did not look triumphant. He looked like a man who had made a hard choice and would make it again and wished he did not have to. At Grimmauld Place the house hummed one thin steady note and held. The lift doors opened on polished stone and a breath that felt thin. The corridor into the Department of Mysteries was quiet in a way that made skin prickle. Wards held their tone too steady. Lamps kept the same pale color no matter how you looked at them. The air did not move. Ron checked left and right and spoke low. "No panicked clerks yet." "Good," Hermione said. "That means we are early or very late." Draco stepped in from the service stair. Cloak dark, jaw set. He carried a narrow iron case against his chest as if he did not trust anyone else to hold it. "I got your message," he said to Harry without warmth. "It ruined my evening." Harry nodded once. "You have the seal." Draco touched the case. "Ancestral lockbreaker. It talks to very old stone if you show it our family name and argue." Ron eyed the case. "And if it refuses to argue, it will shatter," Draco said. "I am aware of the irony." Bill waited at the next corner with the field bag. He had already laid the first ring in the shadow where the corridor widened. Nails. Salt. A compass that ignored north and pulled to a point ahead. "Ground here," he said. "Light feet in the archchamber only." He looked at Draco. "You step where I point or you do not step." Draco gave a short nod. "You point and I do not die. Fair." Harry let the lay staff settle across his palms. The metal was cool and ready. The rings were quiet for now. The tug under his wrist lined up with the compass needle like a heartbeat hearing itself. They crossed the round door room. The walls did not spin. That was worse. The arch-chamber waited. The veil hung like a curtain that knew it should be still and was making an effort. It quivered at the edges. It held. Ron set the west ground. Hermione, the east. Bill set the south and then moved out of the triangle to watch the hall. Draco stayed with Harry at the center. "You said I would not like this," Draco murmured. "You were right." He had color but it sat wrong on his face. His eyes kept wanting to look at the veil and kept stopping before they did. Harry kept his voice steady. "You do not have to like it. You have to help me keep it from taking the city." The floor under the arch clicked. Small sound. Not human. Stone settling in a pattern chosen for it. Hermione held 2 fingers above the east nail and watched the iron vibrate. "We start now," she said. "First ring a notch." Harry moved the first ring. Cold climbed into his arms. The staff hummed once in his bones. The veil took a breath that was not a breath. The compass needles jumped and pressed. Second ring half a notch. He moved. The draw came into the grounds instead of the floor. West ring drank and steadied. East ring drank and fought. South ring sang a thin note. Ron lifted his wand and did not blink. "We have company." Footsteps in the hall. Calm. Punctual. The sound of men who believe doors should be on time. Lysander came into view with 3 robed figures behind him. No masks. Plain faces. Sleeves marked with a white band. The Axiom loyalists walked with the precise pace of people who had rehearsed fear out of their bones. Harry did not turn the staff. He kept his eyes on Lysander. "We told you no." Lysander stopped at the line where any closer meant his weight would pull the room toward the veil. "You told me later," he said. "We do not have later." He looked at the veil and at the floor. "You can feel it. You know this building is a bad idea that learned to talk." Hermione stood in the East Ring and answered level. "Bad ideas are not solved by cutting children out of the map." Lysander did not look angry. He looked sad and tidy. "You are still young enough to think children must learn every lesson the hard way." Ron grimaced. "Funny, you sound like my mom when she is in a mood." Draco gave him a sideways look. "Your mother has better hair." "Focus." Hermione snapped without heat. Lysander lifted a narrow rod of dull metal. Not a wand. A relay made by someone who had counted at a table for too many nights. He set the tip to the floor and pressed. The old wards of the archchamber flicked from patient to sharp. The veil shivered harder. The compasses slammed their stops. Bill spoke from the shadow. "Hold your ring and feed from the west only." Harry obeyed. The strain changed shape. It pulled like a tide down a step rather than a fall through a hole. Lysander looked at Harry. "You have the tool that can stop this today," he said. "You know the price. You drain this place and the lines below it, and you give the world a decade where nothing breaks by accident." Harry held the staff a fraction lower and felt the tremor in his fingers all the way up to his teeth. "And after?" he asked. "After the decade?" Lysander did not blink. "Then you drain another place." Harry swallowed. His mouth tasted like iron. "That is surrender with a schedule." Lysander did not rise to it. "That is finally admitting we built a city on an engine and never changed the oil." Hermione stepped from the ring to the triangle point and brought her voice down to a room tone. "Answer the question you are not saying," she said to him. "Say you want the world smaller so that it can fit inside your hands." Lysander breathed out once. "I want a world that does not require boys like you to ruin themselves fixing it every 10 years. He spoke to Harry again. "You survived prophecy and war and a madman, and you still believe drift is a virtue. You are tired but not tired enough." He pressed the relay. The wards creaked like ice. Floor runes lit under the dust. A heavy pressure moved through the air and tried to get in ears and noses and mouths. Ron switched to short bolts and placed them at knee height. The first adherent stumbled. The second flicked a knife that sang like thin glass. Draco stepped in, turned the blade aside with a shield snap that sounded like a hard clap, and returned a neat banish that took 2 men out of the line and into the hall without breaking bones. "Work with me, Weasley," Draco said, calm and fast. "High then low then break left." Ron grinned despite himself. "About time you admitted I know what I am doing." "High." Draco took high. Ron took low. The timing was clean on the second exchange. Neat on the third. By the fourth they were reading the same beats. Ron kept the banter thin. "You are not bad at this for a rich ferret." Draco did not look back. "And you are not hopeless for a ginger with a hero complex." "Focus," Hermione said again, but the edge of her mouth twitched once. Lysander set both hands on the relay rod and spoke in a tone that matched the foundations. "Cease the waste." The veil rippled hard enough to make the hair on Harry's arms lift. The west ground tried to slide. Nails clicked. Iron whined. The south ring sang louder. Bill raised his voice a notch. "Second ring back a hair. Take from the south before the east splits." Harry obeyed. Sweat ran into his eye and stung. He blinked and missed nothing. "You do not get to call life waste," he said to Lysander. "You had a long career and it did not end the way you wanted. Do not make a funeral out of a city to fix that." Lysander studied him the way a man studies weather. "You think this is about disappointment," he said. "It is about counting bodies and choosing to change the arithmetic." Hermione stepped in front of the East Ring, palm on the lock sewn into her sleeve. "Rooms can be taught to say no," she said. "You knew that once. Say it again before the veil learns to answer only to you." Lysander looked at her like a teacher who wants to agree and cannot without breaking a rule he wrote. "I know what your lock will do," he said. "It will slow me. It will not change what the veil is." Hermione pressed her wrist to her palm. The chamber tone shifted a fraction. The relay rod stopped humming. The veil put its shiver down and then picked it up again, less eager. Ron and Draco finished the last of the adherents without show. Stunners placed clean. Restraints neat. They did not crow. They took flanks and watched the hall. Kingsley will arrive in a minute with 7 loud men. Ron said, we would all love to be done before then. Draco walked up beside Harry and set the iron case on the floor. The lockbreaker works once when it matters, he said. After that, it is iron again. He looked at Lysander with polite dislike. My father paid too much for this. Please make it worth it. He undid the clasps and lifted a round piece worked with runes only the Malfoy vault knew how to cut. He held it up. It hummed like a low bell. Harry felt the floor see it. Lysander saw it too and did not hide his respect. Old work, he said, that might hold the arch for a minute. A minute is useful, Hermione said. Take it. She did not mean take the ring. She meant take the minute. Lysander took a step toward the arch. Bill snapped a hand up without looking away from the south ring. Not you, he said. You have a habit of thinking your body is a shield. Stand still and talk while the children solve your mess. The insult landed and did not stick. Lysander smiled with a tired kind of gratitude. As you like. Draco slid the lockbreaker into the seam at the base of the arch where old ward metal had cracked. The ring gripped stone and gave a soft pulse in time with the compasses. The veil fell from a hard shiver to a tight tick. Harry felt his hands breathe for 2 counts. Now, Hermione said. Harry set his feet and raised the staff. His ribs hurt already. The first ring cut his palms. The second pulled on the tendons in his wrists. The third found his teeth and sat there like a coin. He was too hot and too cold in the same second. Lysander stepped closer to the line and pitched his voice into the heartbeat of the room. One last time, he said.